There's a cartridge sitting in someone's drawer right now. A weathered Game Boy Color game with a faded label that reads Pokémon Silver. To most people, it would look like any other used copy from GameStop's bargain bin. Scratched plastic, well worn from years of adventure through the Johto region. But if you were to load this particular cartridge, boot it up on a Game Boy Color, and wait through that familiar Game Freak logo, you wouldn't find yourself starting a new journey with Professor Elm. Instead, you'd discover something that shouldn't exist. A save file that tells a story far darker than anything Game Freak ever intended. A story about a trainer who achieved everything and lost everything. A story that asks a question we'd rather not consider. What happens to heroes when nobody remembers them? Welcome back to another deep dive, where tonight we're exploring one of the most legendary creepypastas in the Pokémon community. Pokémon Lost Silver. Before we begin, if you enjoy these long-form explorations of game lore and you'd like more content like this, feel free to leave a like or subscribe, but no pressure. I know many of you listen to these while falling asleep, so I won't interrupt your rest later. Now, let me set the stage properly, because understanding where this story came from makes experiencing it all the more chilling. It's June 6th, 2010. The Pokemon community is buzzing with excitement because Heart Gold and Soul Silver, the beloved remakes of Gold and Silver, have just released in North America a few months prior. On 4chan's video game board, an anonymous user makes a post that would go on to become one of the most recognizable horror stories in gaming culture. The post begins simply, innocuously even, with the narrator explaining they're just a college student waiting for their Amazon order of Soul Silver to arrive. To pass the time, they decide to replay their old Crystal version. But there's a problem. Their mother had thrown it away years ago after the save battery died, so our narrator does what any nostalgic Pokemon fan would do. They head to GameStop, looking for a used copy of Silver to tide them over. This $10, fairly cheap. They take it home, pop it into their Game Boy Color, and prepare for a comforting trip down memory lane through the Johto region. But from the very first moment they power on the cartridge, things aren't right. The Game Freak logo appears as it should. That familiar splash screen we've all seen hundreds of times. But instead of smoothly transitioning to the title screen, it freezes. Our narrator turns the game off and on again, thinking maybe the cartridge needs cleaning, maybe the contacts are dirty. The logo freezes again. They try, pressing buttons. Start every button on the Game Boy, desperately trying to get past this screen. And then, after what feels like an eternity, the logo simply vanishes. 5 seconds of black screen. Pure darkness. No title screen. No new game or continue option. Just darkness. And then, without any input from the player, the game loads directly into an existing save file. Already, alarm bells should be ringing. Used cartridges from GameStop are supposed to be wiped clean. That's standard procedure. But this file remains. And when our narrator checks the trainer information, they find something that makes their skin crawl. 'Cause The trainer's name isn't a name at all. It's just 3 dots. Literally 3 dots. As if whoever played this game couldn't even be bothered to give their character an identity. Or perhaps had their identity stripped away entirely. But the strangeness doesn't stop there. This nameless trainer has somehow achieved the impossible. 999 hours and 99 minutes of playtime. The maximum possible. All 16 badges. The 8 from Johto and the 8 from Kanto. 99,999.9 Pokédollars, also maxed out. And perhaps, most impressively, all 251 Pokémon registered in Pokédex. For those unfamiliar with Generation 2, this means the previous owner somehow obtained Mew and Celebi, 2 mythical Pokémon that were only available through limited time events or using cheat devices like the Game Genie. This should be a file belonging to a Pokémon master. Someone who dedicated countless hours to 100% completing the game. A player who achieved everything there was to achieve. So naturally our narrator is curious to see what kind of godlike team this hardcore player must have assembled. They open the party screen, and their excitement turns to confusion, then to something approaching dread. 5 Unown, all level 5, and a Cyndaquil nicknamed Hurry. That's it. That's the team of a supposed Pokemon master. Well, now, for those who might not remember, Unown are these strange letter-shaped Pokemon introduced in Gold and Silver, found exclusively in the ruins of Alv. They're generally considered gimmick Pokemon, weak in battle, only knowing one move called Hidden Power, mostly collected as curiosities because each one represents a different letter of the alphabet or punctuation mark. They're not the kind of Pokemon you'd expect in a champions team. Our narrator, familiar with the unknown alphabet from their own playthrough years ago, now carefully identifies which letters these 5 Unown represent. And they spell out a word, a warning. Leave. Think about that for a moment. The very first thing this save file communicates to you, before you even start playing, is a desperate plea to turn back. Leave. As if the game itself is trying to protect you from what comes next. And that Cyndaquil, nicknamed Hurry, as if time is running out, as if you need to escape before something terrible happens. But our narrator doesn't leave. Of course they don't. Would you? Curiosity is a powerful force, and when confronted with something this bizarre, most of us would need to know more. They check the Cyndaquil's stats and find it's level 5 with only 1 HP remaining. It knows only 2 moves, Olo, Leer, and Flash. Not exactly a battle-ready Pokemon. Sarn. And here's where things get even more unnerving. Our narrator has their Game Boy volume turned all the way up. But when they hover over these Pokemon, there are no cries, no familiar digital chirps that usually accompany Pokemon games. Just pure, absolute silence. The save file places them inside Sprout Tower, that tall pagoda in Violet City, where trainers go to train their Pokemon and test their skills. But something is fundamentally wrong with this version of Sprout Tower. The central pillar, that swaying wooden column that's supposed to move dynamically as you walk around it, is completely static. frozen in place, leaning to one side as if broken. And the tower itself is empty. No monks training their bells proud. No other trainers to battle. Not a single NPC in sight. Just the player character, standing alone in an architectural skeleton that feels more like a tomb than a training ground. Our narrator walks around this hollow structure, searching for an exit, pressing A on everything, hoping to trigger some kind of event or find a staircase. Nothing happens. The room feels inescapable. They check their bag, thinking maybe there's an escape rope they can use to leave this glitched area. The bag is completely empty. Not a single item. And there are no wild Pokémon encounters either. The normal mechanics of the game have simply stopped working. After several minutes of wandering, they finally discover a ladder hidden behind that frozen pillar. They climb down, and the screen goes black. Complete darkness. But this time, something changes. Music starts playing, and our narrator recognizes it immediately. It's the Unown radio theme, that eerie mystical melody that plays when you tune into the ruins of Alpha frequency. A sound that's already unsettling in the regular game becomes absolutely chilling in this context. They're in another dark room, blind except for the small sprite of their character. The narrator checks the Pokegear, thinking they can change the radio station to something less ominous. But when they open it, most of the functions are gone. No phone card, no radio card, no time card, just the map card showing their character as a tiny dot floating in an endless void of black. They remember the Cyndaquil knows Flash, so they select it from the menu, hoping to illuminate the area. But Flash doesn't work the way it's supposed to. There's no message saying the room grew brighter, no text saying hurry used Flash. Instead, without any warning or announcement, the screen floods with red. Not the gentle illumination Flash normally provides, but a menacing crimson glow that bathes everything in the color of blood. And now our narrator can see where they are. Still in Sprout Tower, but the entire environment has been tinted this horrific red. The immobile pillar looming before them like a gravestone. They continue north, walking for what feels like forever through this scarlet nightmare, until they finally encounter something. NPCs. Generic men and women scattered throughout the area, but they're all facing the same direction, staring at that broken central pillar. Their sprites are completely white, washed out, colorless. And when the narrator tries to talk to them, nothing happens. These aren't characters. They're ghosts, hollow shells standing vigil over something long dead. The narrator keeps walking north through this endless red hallway populated by these silent, colorless figures, and eventually the pillar itself appears different. It's chopped off. It's severed. And standing where the top of the pillar should be is a sprite. A transparent sprite. Red, the legendary trainer from Pokémon Red and Blue who waits at the top of Minute Silver and Gold and Silver. Except this red is ghostly, translucent, wrong, and without the player pressing anything, without any warning, a battle begins. Now, in the regular Pokémon games. Encountering Red at the summit of Mount Silver is supposed to be this climactic moment. He's the strongest trainer in the game, your character from the previous generation. Silent, mysterious, legendary. But this battle is nothing like that encounter. And this is something else entirely. Something deeply wrong. The battle screen loads, and instead of the usual battle interface with all its options, the narrator is shown something disturbing. The text reads, "Wants to battle," but there's no name attached, as if Red has been erased, reduced to a pronoun, an entity without identity. Both trainers supposedly have full teams, but only one Pokemon from each side appears. The narrator sends out their shiny Celebi, and immediately they notice the back sprite is incomplete. Half a Celebi. One arm, one leg, one eye, cut vertically down the middle as if bisected. The shiny animation plays, but it's wrong. Instead of the pleasant sparkle effect that normally accompanies a shiny Pokemon, the sound is harsh and grating, like multiple uses of the move Screech played simultaneously. A sound designed to set your teeth on edge. Red sends out Pikachu. Level 255. The maximum possible level in the game's code. Well beyond what should be achievable through normal gameplay. But this Pikachu isn't the cheerful electric mouse we all know. It looks sad. Its sprite shows tears streaming from its eyes. And here's where the battle becomes even more bizarre. The narrator isn't given the normal options to fight, use items, switch Pokemon, or run. They can only access the attacks menu. And Celebi knows only one move, Perish Song. For those unfamiliar, Perish Song is a move that causes both the user and the target to faint after 3 turns. IMDEAD. It's a move of mutual destruction, a countdown to death that can't be stopped once it begins. But our narrator has no choice. They select it. The game announces Celebi used Perish Song. 3 turns until both Pokemon faint. 3 turns until the end. But Pikachu moves first because of its absurd level. The text announces Pikachu used Curse. Curse is normally a ghost type move that damages the user to inflict gradual damage on the opponent. But Pikachu isn't a ghost type. It shouldn't even be able to learn this move. Yet here it is, sacrificing itself to damage Celebi. The turns progress automatically. No player input required. Our narrator is simply forced to watch. Pikachu used Flail. Flail is a move that becomes more powerful the lower the user's HP. But Pikachu is at full health, so it doesn't do much damage. Celebi used Perish Song. But the move was already used, so nothing happens. Pikachu used Frustration. Now this is interesting. Frustration is a move that becomes more powerful the less the Pokemon likes its trainer. And this attack does massive damage, reducing Celebi's HP to less than 10. Implying that this Pikachu absolutely despises Red, hates him with an intensity that translates into devastating power. Celebi used Pain Split, another move that Celebi shouldn't know, but it uses it anyway. Pain Split evenly distributes HP between the user and the target. Now both Pokemon have around 150 HP. Pikachu used Mean Look, a move that prevents the opponent from fleeing. Not that it matters in this battle where running was never an option. And then the parish song counter reaches 0, plus 6, and Kalebi has died. Not fainted, died. The word choice is deliberate, final. Instead of the normal animation where a Pokémon slides off screen, Celebi's sprite simply vanishes, erased from existence. But the battle doesn't end. Pikachu is still standing somehow, still on the field despite Parish Song's effect. It uses one more move beyond its normal 5 move limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond, a move that causes the opponent to faint if the user faints. One final act of mutual destruction. Pikachu has died. Again, that word. Died. The battle ends with a slow fade-out animation, and the transparent red sprite appears with empty dialogue. Dadikabats, just ellipses. No words, no final statement. And then, in an image that burned itself into the minds of everyone who read this story, Red Sprite is suddenly beheaded. His transparent head simply disappears, leaving only his ghostly headless body standing there for a moment before the battle screen fades to black completely. Our narrator finds themselves back in the overworld, and their character sprite has changed. Gold is now as transparent as Red was, becoming a ghost himself. They check the trainer profile, and the sprite has deteriorated further. Now it's just a head, no body, just a floating head with completely transparent skin and black voids where the eyes should be. And the badge count has changed again. 40 badges. 40. A number that shouldn't exist, that has no meaning in the game's logic, but clearly represents something in this deteriorating narrative. The party screen shows the team has transformed once again. All level 20 shiny Unown, and they spell out a new message. No more. No more. The game is telling them it's almost finished. The end is near. There's no music playing anymore, but our narrator swears they can still feel something. Some presence in that silence. They're back in their room in New Bark Town, where every Pokémon journey in Johto begins. But when they try to move, the sprite doesn't animate. Gold doesn't walk. Whoa, he floats, drifting through his childhood home like the ghost he's become. The background scrolling beneath him while his limbs remain completely still. The narrator explores the room, afraid to go downstairs, afraid of what might be waiting. They interact with objects, trying to trigger any kind of normal game behavior. When they finally work up the courage to descend, when they finally face what's waiting on the ground floor, Dexierme, they discover that the main character's mother is gone. The house is empty. Nobody remembers Gold. Nobody is waiting for him to come home. They exit the house, emerging into New Bark Town, but the town isn't there. Just blackness, airwall, an endless void. They walk south, wandering through this digital darkness for what feels like an eternity, until they finally encounter something. A sprite. Gold's regular sprite. Not transparent, not deteriorating, just standing there. The narrator approaches and presses A to interact. The sprite speaks. Goodbye forever. Note the space between forever and the ellipsis. As if even grammar is breaking down. and the sprite vanishes. The text appears. Used nightmare. An unknown entity. Using nightmare. A move that damages sleeping Pokemon. But Gold isn't asleep, or perhaps he is. Perhaps this entire journey has been one long dying dream. Gold does the escape rope animation again. That spinning descent into darkness. Falling down. 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 Back to that small hollowed out room surrounded by graves they visited earlier. Except this time, there's no sprite. Gold is gone. The narrator tries to move, tries to do anything, but nothing responds. No wall bumping sounds, no character animation, just a static screen of that small room surrounded by tombstones. And then, the final message appears. The party screen opens automatically. All level 25 Unown, and they spell out the last message. IMDEAD. I'm dead. As soon as the narrator returns to the overworld, the room becomes completely enclosed. Walls appear where exits used to be. The narrator realizes what this room is. What it's always been. The text confirms it. R.I.P. Rest in peace, followed by those 3 dots. The nameless trainer's gravestone. Gold died. The story makes it explicit. He died presumably a few years after defeating Red on Mint Silver. He was a young trainer, probably not even 13 years old, who achieved everything there was to achieve in the Pokémon world. He caught all 251 Pokémon. He defeated every gym leader in 2 regions. He became the champion. He climbed Mint Silver and defeated the most legendary trainer of the previous generation. He became a living legend, a Pokémon master, and then he died. And nobody remembered him. The next generation of trainers surpassed his records by simply defeating the Elite Four. His name, those 3 dots, that absence of identity, was forgotten. He died alone. His Pokémon died with him. And now he exists only as a glitched save file on a used cartridge, endlessly repeating his final moments, forever trapped in a digital purgatory. Unable to escape, unable to rest, unable to be remembered. Our narrator tries resetting the game, hoping to break free from this ending, but the game loads right back to that same screen. That grave. That unchanging message. They're trapped just like Gold is trapped. The only way to escape is to physically turn off the Game Boy. To walk away from this nightmare. And our narrator does. Finally giving up on this horrible cartridge, shaken by what they've experienced. The original poster concluded their story with a reflection that perfectly captures why Lost Silver resonated so deeply with the Pokémon community. They wrote that after this experience, they could never look at Unown the same way again. These letter Pokémon, these gimmick creatures that most players ignore, had become harbingers of death. Messengers spelling out warnings and truths that nobody wants to acknowledge. They mention that people say only the first generation has folk tales and legends, but the second generation had shown them how unpleasant the truth can be. The truth that no matter who you are, no matter what you achieve, death comes for everyone, and worse than death, being forgotten. Now, let's take a step back from the narrative itself. because understanding the meta context of Lost Silver is crucial to appreciating its impact. This story appeared on 4chan in June 2010, posted anonymously so we don't know who originally wrote it. It was formatted as a first-person account, written in that classic Creepypasta style where the narrator is sharing their personal experience. And the timing was perfect. Heart Gold and Soul Silver had just released, bringing renewed attention to the Johto region, making players nostalgic for their gold and silver memories. So when this story appeared, it hit right at the moment when the community was most emotionally invested in these games. The genius of Lost Silver lies in how it subverts everything we expect from Pokémon. These games are supposed to be joyful adventures, stories about friendship and growth and achievement, where your Pokémon never truly die. They just faint and can be revived at a Pokémon Center, where your accomplishments are permanent, recorded in Hall of Fame screens, and commemorated with champions becoming NPCs that future players can battle. Lost Silver looks at these comforting mechanics and asks a darker question. What if Pokémon could actually die? What if your achievements meant nothing? What if becoming champion was just a temporary title that the next kid could claim? What if you weren't special at all? The Unown messages create this perfect escalating tension, starting with leave, a warning to turn back before it's too late. Hurry. The urgency of impending doom, heated, announcing the death of Cyndaquil. Your first real loss. Dying, as Celebi and Gold both slip away. No more, approaching the end. IMDEAD, the final admission. Each message strips away another layer of hope, moving from warning to aftermath to acceptance, and that badge progression. Starting at 16, the normal maximum, then 24, then 32, then 40. Each increase marks Gold's deterioration. His sprite loses its arms, then its legs, then its body, and with each physical loss, the badge count increases beyond possibility. It's almost like the game is keeping score of his decay. It's beyond and deep, counting down to his complete dissolution in measurements that only make sense in this corrupted digital space. The battle with Red deserves special attention because it's loaded with symbolism. Pikachu, Red's most iconic Pokémon, is at level 255 and crying. It uses frustration to devastating effect, a move powered by hatred for its trainer. This implies something dark about Red's story too. That maybe he wasn't the noble, silent protagonist we remembered. Maybe there's a reason he's alone on top of Mint Silver. Maybe Pikachu has reasons to hate him. And when both Pokémon use moves that guarantee mutual death, Perish Song and Destiny Bond, it's like they're both trying to escape, trying to end their suffering the only way they can. Through complete annihilation, the story works on multiple levels simultaneously. On the surface, it's a classic haunted game cartridge story. A corrupted save file that shouldn't exist. Digital ghosts trapped in code. But deeper than that, it's an existential meditation on mortality and legacy. Gold represents anyone who's ever tried to be the best, who's pushed themselves to achieve everything possible. And the story asks, What does it matter? You'll die anyway. You'll be forgotten anyway. The next generation will surpass you without even trying. Your struggles and triumphs will become meaningless data on an outdated cartridge that someone buys for $10 at GameStop. It's profoundly nihilistic, which is part of why it hit so hard. Pokémon games are power fantasies. They're about starting as a nobody and becoming the champion. About forming bonds with creatures that will never betray you. About a world where friendship and determination can overcome any obstacle. Lost Silver strips all of that away. Your Pokémon die. Your achievements are forgotten. Your friends abandon you. You end up alone in a grave that nobody visits, with a name that nobody remembers, reduced to 3 meaningless dots. But here's where the story of Lost Silver gets even more interesting. Because it didn't end with that original 4chan post. The Creepypasta was so popular, so impactful, that it inspired an entire ecosystem of fan works. Within just a few months of the original story's posting, by September 2010, a game developer named Reed Maxwell created a playable fan game that faithfully recreated the events described in the Creepypasta. Now, it's important to understand that this wasn't a ROM hack. Maxwell didn't modify the actual Pokémon Silver ROM. Instead, he built the game from scratch using GameMaker, utilizing an existing Pokémon engine as a base. This meant you didn't need an emulator or a copy of Pokémon Silver to play it. It was a standalone executable. You could download it and experience Lost Silver yourself. Walk through those empty halls. Battle that crying Pikachu. Read those unknown messages firsthand. And Maxwell didn't just recreate the original story. He expanded it. The fan game includes additional content that answers the question. What if you said no? You know that moment in the story where there's presumably a sign saying, "Turn back now." The original Creepypasta doesn't go into detail about that choice, but the fan game does. If you choose no, refusing to turn back, you unlock an alternate path called Hidden. The hidden route was actually written by the original Creepypasta author. Maxwell reached out to them, and they provided additional story content specifically for the game. The hidden path is even darker than the main route, if you can believe that. It features distorted music, dark reprises of familiar Pokémon Silver themes, but slowed down and with missing notes, creating this unsettling audio landscape. NPCs lack eyes and names. Dialogue is sparse and often cuts off mid-sentence. The entire aesthetic is one of decay and incompleteness. On the hidden route, Tei, as you progress through the game, Gold Sprite deteriorates even more severely. He starts with arms and legs, but gradually loses them. His colors fade. He becomes more and more transparent until he's barely visible, and the ending changes slightly. Instead of just R.I.P., the gravestone reads R.I.P. PKMN Trainer Gold, giving him back his identity at the very end, acknowledging his name one final time before eternal rest. But Maxwell wasn't done. 2 years after the original Lost Silver posting, the anonymous author surfaced again with a sequel. not a continuation of the main story, but a backstory. This sequel was called Lost Silver Ashes, and it focused on Celebi, that shiny Celebi that appears in the original story, cut in half, knowing only Perish song. Ashes explains how that Pokémon ended up that way. It reveals that Gold Celebi was burned by Ho-Oh's sacred fire, literally split in half by flames, scarred permanently, turned into a creature that exists between life and death. Perfect for a team of ghosts. Maxwell incorporated this backstory into his fan game as well, creating a route called Ashes that you could unlock. Players could experience Celebi's tragic past firsthand, see the events that led to its disfigurement, understand why it knows Perish song, a move about ending things, about accepting death. But wait, there's more. In 2020, on the 10th anniversary of Lost Silver's original posting, Maxwell announced he was remaking the entire fan game from scratch. The new version was titled Lost Silver, built to work better on modern Windows systems since the original game had compatibility issues. Lost Silver features completely updated sprites, more detailed, more gruesome. That shiny Celebi isn't just split in half anymore. You can see its internal organs in horrifying detail. The deterioration of Gold's sprite is more graphic. The whole visual presentation is enhanced to be even more disturbing than the original fan game. In Lost Silver adds even more routes. There's a route called Ruins that focuses on a Houndoom named Forever. This dark type Pokemon was apparently obtained through trade, and Houndoom obtained via trade are notorious for being disobedient. But Forever seemed to be guiding Gold through the afterlife in this route, leading him through the ruins of Alph. The Unown in this route spell out die, which seems threatening. But Forever might actually be trying to help Gold find peace. It's ambiguous, haunting. The Ruins route also gives more focus to Silver, Gold's rival from the original games. In this path, Silver appears, and his Unown spell out, sorry. He sends out a low-level Totodile, suggesting a desire to start over, to go back to the beginning. There's heavy implication that Silver feels responsible for Gold's fate somehow. That maybe their rivalry pushed Gold too hard. Maybe Silver said or did something that contributed to Gold's death. By the end of the battle, Silver's sprite becomes horrendously mutilated, suggesting he's paying some terrible price for his regret. A demo of Lost Silver released on Halloween 2022, with a patched version following on November 13th. The fan community went wild. Here was Lost Silver, updated for a new generation, more polished and more terrifying than ever. The soundtrack alone is worth discussing. Slowed down versions of beloved Pokémon tracks. The Sprout Tower theme becoming a funeral dirge. The Unown radio theme stretched and distorted into something barely recognizable. Audio designed to create maximum unease. Beyond the official fan game and its remakes, Lost Silver inspired countless other works. YouTube became home to dozens of dramatic readings and narrations. Channels like Mr. Creepypasta and Creepypasta, specialists in horror narration, produced audio versions of the story with sound effects and atmospheric music. These narrations reached millions of listeners, meaning people would put them on before bed, letting the story wash over them in the darkness, turning a visual creepypasta into an audio experience. And somehow that made it even more effective. Because when you're listening in the dark, your imagination fills in the details. You picture that deteriorating sprite. You envision those empty halls. You feel that dread more personally. Fan artists created countless interpretations of the characters. Gold as a ghost, sometimes depicted as a young boy missing limbs, crying blood, sometimes as just a floating head with void black eyes. Syllabi split vertically, guts spilling out, still somehow alive and in pain. Red's beheaded corpse, standing at the top of Sprout Tower. Pikachu with tears streaming down its face, level 255 and filled with hate. These images became iconic within creepypasta communities. You could post a picture of a half-destroyed Celebi, and immediately everyone would know. Lost Silver. The story even spawned theories and discussions that continue to this day. Kartik. Some fans interpret the badge progression symbolically. 16 is normal, representing gold at the peak of his life. 24 might represent the hours in a day, the passage of time. 32 could be a reference to color depth and graphics, like gold is losing dimensional fidelity, becoming less real. 40 has no clear symbolic meaning, which makes it perfect for representing complete dissolution, a number beyond logic, beyond meaning. Others discuss the nature of the cartridge itself. Is it actually haunted, possessed by Gold's ghost? Or is it just an incredibly elaborate ROM hack created by some sadistic programmer who wanted to disturb people? The original creepypasta leaves this ambiguous. There's no confirmation of supernatural elements. It could all be code. Twisted game design meant to tell a story about death and loss. But that ambiguity is part of the power. It could be either, or both. Maybe someone created this hack, and through creating it, invited something else in. There's also fascinating discussion about what the Unown represent in the broader context of Lost Silver. In the regular Pokémon games, Unown are mysterious creatures connected to language and reality itself. The ruins of Alph, where you find them, contain ancient puzzles and cryptic messages. They're associated with Arceus in later generations, the god Pokémon that created the universe. Some lore suggests Unown can alter reality when they gather in large numbers. So using them as messengers in Lost Silver isn't just a creative choice. It's tapping into existing game mythology. These Pokémon that can potentially reshape reality, spelling out the truth about Gold's fate. Warning anyone who plays that death is inevitable, that achievement is temporary, that everyone will be forgotten. The messages they spell become increasingly personal and desperate. Leave is a warning from outside. Like the game itself trying to protect you. Hurry implies you're running out of time. But then Heated becomes more specific, more intimate. Someone you knew died. Dying suggests the process is ongoing. You're watching something expire in real time. No more is resignation, acceptance that everything is ending. And IMDEAD is the final confession. First person, direct. The trainer himself telling you the truth. Each message pulls you deeper into the nightmare, from observer to participant to victim. Now let's talk about why Lost Silver became so much more impactful than countless other gaming creepypastas that emerged around the same time. Because in 2010, creepypastas were exploding in popularity. Sites like the Creepypasta wiki were collecting thousands of horror stories. Gaming creepypastas were particularly popular. Stories about haunted cartridges and cursed games. We had Been Drowned about a haunted Majora's Mask cartridge, Sonic.exe about a demonic version of Sonic the Hedgehog, Pokémon Black about a bootleg game where your starter murders everyone. So what made Lost Silver stand out? Part of it was the quality of the writing. The original author understood pacing perfectly. They knew when to be specific and when to leave things ambiguous. They didn't over-explain. They let the imagery speak for itself. When Gold's sprite loses its limbs, we don't need a paragraph explaining what that represents. We feel it. When those Unown spell out IMDEAD, we don't need exposition about mortality. The message hits us directly in the gut. But more than that, Lost Silver tapped into something real about the Pokémon experience. Everyone who played these games as a kid remembers that moment of achievement, finally beating the Elite Four and becoming champion. That sense of accomplishment when you complete the Pokédex. The pride of defeating Red on Mount Silver, overcoming the toughest challenge the game had to offer. Those moments felt significant. They felt permanent. Jatorid, you were a Pokemon master. Your name would be in the Hall of Fame forever. But then what? You move on to the next game. Your achievements in Gold and Silver become irrelevant when Ruby and Sapphire release. The Pokemon you caught and trained for hundreds of hours are stuck on that cartridge. Eventually, the save battery dies. Your file corrupts. All that effort, all those memories, gone. And Lost Silver forces you to confront that reality. It asks what happens to game protagonists when we stop playing. When we move on to the next adventure, do they keep existing in some digital purgatory, waiting forever for a player who never returns? This existential angle separates Lost Silver from other gaming creepypastas. Most haunted game stories are about an external threat, a demon possessing the cartridge, a vengeful spirit trapped in the code, something attacking you through the screen. But Lost Silver is about decay, about abandonment, about the inevitable end that comes for everyone. Player character or real person. It's not trying to jump scare you. It's trying to make you feel something deeper, a melancholy that lingers long after you finish reading. The community response reflected this emotional depth. In discussion threads on forums and Reddit, people didn't just talk about being scared. They talked about being sad, about feeling genuinely disturbed by the implications, about going back to their old Pokemon games and looking at their teams differently, wondering about the digital creatures they'd abandoned. Some fans created tributes to their childhood Pokemon, writing stories about what happened to their teams after they stopped playing. Lost Silver inspired empathy for fictional creatures in a way few creepypastas ever have, and the timing created this perfect storm. The people reading Lost Silver in 20 winning 10 were often millennials who'd grown up with Pokémon, who'd played Red and Blue as children in the late 90s, who'd experienced Gold and Silver as the next generation of their beloved franchise. These games were nostalgia incarnate. They represented childhood, innocence, simpler times. So when Lost Silver came along and corrupted that nostalgia, turned those comforting memories into something dark, it hit especially hard. It was attacking not just a game, but a piece of your childhood. There's also something to be said about the first-person narrative style. The original post reads like a genuine experience. Someone sharing something strange that happened to them. There's no dramatic build-up, no fancy prose. On just a college student explaining what they found on a used cartridge. This mundane framing makes the horror more effective. It could have happened to anyone. You could have bought that cartridge at GameStop. You could have booted it up expecting nostalgia and found nightmare instead. The creepypasta genre thrives on this kind of verisimilitude. The best stories present themselves as real experiences being shared. Found footage in text form. And in 2010, this was still fairly novel. People were still figuring out how to tell horror stories on the internet. Lost Silver became a template. It showed how to structure a gaming creepypasta effectively. And start with relatable setup. Introduce strangeness gradually. Build tension through accumulation of wrong details. Deliver increasingly disturbing revelations. End with an image or concept that haunts the reader. Countless stories tried to replicate this formula afterward. Some succeeded. Many failed. Because what they missed was the emotional core. Lost Silver isn't just a series of spooky events. It's a meditation on themes that resonate universally. Death, legacy, memory, the fear of being forgotten, the question of whether our accomplishments mean anything in the face of mortality. These are heavy philosophical concepts wrapped in the skin of a Pokémon story. Making them accessible, making them hit harder because they're unexpected in this context. Let's examine the symbolism more closely because Lost Silver is layered with meaning. The empty sprout tower is significant. In regular Gold and Silver, Sprout Tower is where new trainers go to practice. It's an early game location. A tutorial area essentially, so placing Gold there at the end of his journey creates this cyclical feeling. He's back at the beginning, but everything is hollow now. The training ground is empty because there's nobody left to train. The journey is over. The pillar that's supposed to sway with each step, representing balance and growth, is frozen and broken, representing stagnation. Death. The red lighting that floods the area after Flash is used deserves analysis too. Red is the color of blood, obviously. But in the context of Pokémon, Red is also the name of the legendary trainer, the protagonist of the first generation. So bathing everything in red light could symbolize Red's influence. His shadow falling over Gold. the previous generation haunting the current one. Or maybe it represents gold, seeing everything through a lens of trauma. The world literally colored by blood and death. Gold's deteriorating sprite is probably the most visually striking element of the story. Starting with arms missing, then legs, then becoming just a head, then completely transparent. This physical decomposition mirrors his journey toward death, but it also represents loss of agency. Without arms, you can't hold Pokeballs. Without legs, you can't walk your own path. Without a body, you can't exist in the physical world. Each loss strips away more capability, more identity, until nothing remains but consciousness trapped in a digital grave. The badge progression beyond 16 is fascinating from a narrative perspective. 16 is the maximum in the actual games. 8 from Johto, 8 from Kanto, but in Lost Silver, the count increases as gold deteriorates. 24, 32, 40, each impossible number marking another stage of dissolution. Some fans interpret this as gold continuing to collect badges even after death, trying desperately to hold on to his identity as a trainer, trying to keep achieving even as he fades. But the numbers become meaningless. They're not real achievements anymore, just a counter ticking upward in a broken game. Others see the badge numbers as representing something else entirely. In binary and computer science, multiples of 8 are significant. 16, 32, 64. These are powers of 2. They represent memory architecture, data structure. So gold accumulating impossible badge counts could symbolize him becoming data, losing his humanity and becoming pure code. Numbers in a system that no longer functions properly. The Cyndaquil named Hurry is easy to overlook but incredibly important. A Sifo, it's your starter Pokemon in the Johto games if you choose Fire type. Marker, the first partner you receive from Professor Elm, the creature that accompanies you on your entire journey. Mayqueer, so seeing it here at level 5 with only 1 HP, knowing only Leer and Flash, is heartbreaking if you think about it. This is Gold's first Pokemon, his closest companion, reduced to a fragile thing clinging to life. Named Hurry as if begging you to escape before you end up like them. And when Cyndaquil faints later in the story, not during battle, but just spontaneously, the text says it died, not fainted, died. That distinction matters. In Pokemon games, your partners never die. They faint in battle and can be revived. It's a kid-friendly way to handle defeat. Death doesn't exist in this universe supposedly. But Lost Silver breaks that rule. It introduces permanent death into a world designed to avoid it. Baram. And that makes everything that follows feel more dangerous, more real, more tragic. The shiny Celebi split in half is another powerful image. Celebi is a time travel Pokemon in the official lore. A mythical creature that can move through time. Having one on your team in Gold and Silver required either attending special Nintendo events or using cheat devices. It was rare, special. So seeing it here, disfigured and broken, learning only Parish Song, creates this sense of wrongness. Even legendary Pokemon aren't safe. Even creatures with power over time itself can't escape death. And the fact that it's shiny, usually a mark of incredible luck and value, just makes the tragedy worse. Something rare and beautiful corrupted into an instrument of mutual destruction. The Ashes Root expansion that explains Celebi's backstory adds another layer. The refers down, learning that it was burned by Ho-Oh's sacred fire, split in half by the flames of the very Pokémon that's supposed to represent rebirth and resurrection in Johto mythology, is deeply ironic. Ho-Oh is associated with the burned tower in Ecruteak City. The legend says it created the legendary beasts, Raikou, Entei, and Suicune, by resurrecting Pokémon that died when the tower burned. So Ho-Oh has power over life and death, but in Lost Silver's twisted narrative, it becomes an agent of destruction, scarring Celebi permanently, creating a time traveler that can't escape its own past trauma. Red's role in the story is deliberately ambiguous, and that makes him more effective. In the regular games, Red is this silent legend, the strongest trainer. Standing alone at the summit of Matt Silver, you defeat him and become the new champion. It's supposed to be this triumphant moment, passing the torch to a new generation. But Lost Silver asks what that victory cost. The original Creepypasta suggests Gold defeated Red on Matt Silver, and sometime after that, Gold died. Some interpretations of the expanded lore suggest Red fell to his death after being defeated, that Gold's victory directly caused Red's demise. In the Lost Silver battle, Red appears as a transparent sprite, already dead, already a ghost. Reggie, his Pikachu, is crying and using frustration with devastating power, implying it hates Red intensely. This isn't the heartwarming partnership between trainer and Pokemon we expect from Red and Pikachu. Something went wrong. Maybe Red pushed too hard. Maybe he isolated himself on that mountain and neglected his partner. Maybe Pikachu resents being the last remaining member of a dead trainer's team. When Red gets beheaded at the end of the battle, is that Gold's revenge? A punishment for whatever happened between them? Or is it Red's own story catching up to him? The story doesn't tell us. And that uncertainty is frightening. Pikachu using Perish Song and Destiny Bond moves that guarantee death, suggests it wants to die. It's choosing mutual destruction, taking Celebi down with it, but also ensuring its own end. That's not the behavior of a happy Pokemon. That's the action of a creature that's suffered too much, that wants the pain to stop. And if Pikachu, one of the most iconic and beloved Pokemon in the entire franchise, can be pushed to that point, what does that say about the world of Lost Silver? Osesakti, what horrors exist in this version of the Pokemon universe? The story's ending is perfect in its bleakness. Betzigen, Gold's grave surrounded by other graves, implying multiple Pokemon died with him. The text R.I.P., right? Those 3 dots representing his non-name, forever identified only by the absence of identity. The narrator trapped in this screen, unable to escape until they physically turn off the Game Boy. Even resetting doesn't help. The game just loads back to that same grave. That same ending. You can't change it. You can't save Gold. You can't give him a happy ending. All you can do is witness his death over and over, or walk away. That's a bold narrative choice. Most horror stories give you some kind of resolution, a way to defeat the monster, a method to break the curse. But Lost Silver offers no solution. Gold is dead. He will always be dead. You can't save him because you're experiencing his story after it's already over. You're not playing through Gold's journey to becoming a champion. You're playing through the aftermath and the epilogue written in decay and despair. It's voyeuristic in a way. Invasive. Like reading someone's suicide note. The narrator's final reflection adds a meta layer that enhances everything. Placing quirk, they mention they can never look at Ian Man the same way again. These gimmick Pokémon, these letter-shaped creatures most players ignore, have been recontextualized as harbingers of death, probably as truth-tellers, spelling out realities we'd rather avoid. And then that line about how the second generation showed them how unpleasant the truth can be. It's acknowledging that Gold and Silver, while nostalgic and beloved, might actually have darker undertones than we realized. The second generation is about legacy, about following in the footsteps of the previous heroes. About time passing and new trainers taking your place. Lost Silver just makes that subtext explicit and horrifying. Now let's talk about how Lost Silver influenced the broader Creepypasta community. Because its impact extended far beyond just Pokémon fans. The story demonstrated how to effectively subvert children's media, how to take something innocent and reveal darkness beneath the surface. After Lost Silver, we saw an explosion of creepypastas targeting kid-friendly franchises. My Little Pony, SpongeBob SquarePants, Super Mario. Every popular children's property got the creepypasta treatment. Some were effective, many were not, because they missed what made Lost Silver work. Bad creepypastas just add blood and violence to cute properties. They make Pikachu into a demon with hyper-realistic eyes. They have Mario screaming in agony for no reason. They rely on shock value without substance. Lost Silver doesn't do that. Yes, Gold bleeds from his eyes. Yes, Pokémon die. But that's not what makes the story scary. What makes it scary is the existential dread. The question of what happens when you're forgotten. The image of being trapped eternally in a moment of death. The violence is a symptom of deeper horror, not the horror itself. Lost Silver also popularized the haunted game cartridge trope in ways that Ben Drowned and other stories expanded on. The idea that a physical object, a game cartridge you could hold, might contain something malevolent, something that wants to be found. This plays into fears about cursed objects, about bringing something evil into your home without realizing it. But again, Lost Silver is subtle about this. The story never confirms whether the cartridge is actually haunted. Maybe it's just a really disturbing ROM hack. Maybe someone put considerable effort into creating this horrible experience and sold it to GameStop for someone to find. That's almost more frightening than supernatural possession. The idea that a human being would create this deliberately, would want someone to experience Gold's death. The fan game phenomenon is worth exploring more deeply, because Reed Maxwell's creation of a playable Lost Silver game changed everything. Suddenly, this wasn't just a story you read. It was an experience you could have yourself. You could download the game, boot it up, walk through Sprout Tower, watch gold deteriorate, battle reds, crying Pikachu, see that grave at the end. It transformed Lost Silver from fiction into a form of interactive horror. And Maxwell was incredibly dedicated to authenticity. He studied the original Creepypasta meticulously. Every detail mentioned in the story appears in the game. The static pillar in Sprout Tower, the Unown messages spelling out their warnings, the red-tinted rooms, the progressive deterioration of Gold's sprite, the battle with Red and all its impossible moves. Maxwell even added sound design, those distorted music tracks, the unsettling silence where Pokémon cries should be. Playing the game is like stepping inside the Creepypasta. Experiencing it firsthand rather than reading about someone else's experience. But Maxwell also understood that a game could expand beyond the original story. The hidden route gave players agency. Instead of just following the predetermined path, you could choose to refuse the warning. You could say no to turning back. And the game would show you what happens when you make that choice. It goes darker, stranger, more abstract. The hidden route is almost dreamlike in its logic. Characters without eyes or names. Music that's barely recognizable. A sense that reality itself is breaking down. It's the difference between visiting a graveyard and being buried alive. The ashes and ruins routes added narrative depth. They answered questions, provided backstory, but they did so without removing the mystery. Learning that Celebi was burned by Ho-Oh doesn't explain everything. It raises new questions. Why did Ho-Oh attack Celebi? What was Gold doing when this happened? The ruins route with Silver apologizing creates intrigue. What is he sorry for? What role did their rivalry play in Gold's death? Good horror doesn't explain everything. It gives you pieces and lets your imagination fill in the gaps. And Maxwell understood that perfectly. Lost Silver, taking 10 years to develop, shows Maxwell's commitment to the project. He announced it in 2020 on the anniversary. Spent years rebuilding everything from scratch. Updated the engine for modern systems. Redesigned all the sprites with more detail. Enhanced the audio. Added new routes and expanded the story. This wasn't a cash grab. This was a passion project. Someone who loved Lost Silver so much, they wanted to give it the treatment it deserved. And the community responded with enthusiasm. The Halloween 2022 demo release was celebrated. People had waited a decade for this. And it delivered. The graphics in Lost Silver are genuinely disturbing. The original fan game was limited by Game Boy Color aesthetics. Simple sprites, limited colors, but those limitations created a certain atmosphere. Retro horror. Familiar visuals corrupted. Lost Silver maintains that aesthetic while adding detail. You can see Gold's bones through his transparent skin. Celebi's organs are visible where it's been split. The decay is more explicit, more biological. It stops being pixel art and starts feeling like you're witnessing actual death. It's confronting in ways the original wasn't, but some fans prefer the original fan game. They argue that leaving more to imagination makes it scarier. Dierim, that over-detailing removes mystery. It's the classic debate in horror. What you don't see is often more frightening than what you do see. Both versions have merit. The original is more subtle, more suggestive. Lost Silver is more visceral, more immediate. Both achieve horror effectively, just through different methods. YouTube narrations brought Lost Silver to an even wider audience. Not everyone wants to read long text posts. Not everyone has access to download and play fan games. But almost everyone can listen to a YouTube video. Channels specializing in creepypasta narration became hugely popular in the early 2010s. Mr. Creepypasta, Miss Creeps McPasta, Creepy's Night Creepypasta Janier. These channels would take written stories and perform them, add music, sound effects, create an audio experience. Lost Silver was perfect for this format. The story is linear, easy to follow, has clear beats. Narrators would add ambient music during the Sprout Tower exploration. Use the actual Unown radio theme from the games. Include sound effects like Game Boy button presses, Pokémon cries, battle sounds. Some narrations included the actual fan game footage as visuals, letting viewers see what the narrator was describing. Others used fan art, images of ghostly gold. Torn Celebi, Crying Pikachu. These narrations reached millions of views. People would listen to them at night, while falling asleep, as background while gaming, and the comment sections became communities. People sharing their reactions, missing their interpretations, their own stories about abandoned Pokemon saves. Lost Silver stopped being just a story. Before it became a shared experience, a cultural touchstone. You could reference it and people would immediately know what you meant. The phrase 3 dots became shorthand in the community. Just saying that would evoke Lost Silver. Images of unknown spelling, leave or IMDEAD became memes, not in the humorous sense, but in the sense of recognizable cultural symbols. You could post a picture of a mutilated Celebi with no context, and fans would understand. That's how deeply Lost Silver embedded itself in internet horror culture. Let's discuss the psychological impact. Why does this story affect people so strongly? Part of it is the nostalgia corruption angle we've mentioned. Pokémon represents childhood for millions of people. It's comfort media, happy memories. So seeing it twisted into horror creates cognitive dissonance. Your brain tries to reconcile the cute Pokémon you love with the disturbing images Lost Silver presents. And that mental conflict creates unease. But deeper than that, Lost Silver taps into fears about mortality that we all carry. The fear of being forgotten after we die. The fear that our accomplishments won't matter. That we'll leave no lasting impact. That future generations will move on without even knowing we existed. Gold achieved everything possible in his world. He was the champion, the Pokémon master, the person everyone should remember. And he's reduced to 3 dots on a gravestone that nobody visits. If even the champion can be forgotten, what hope do the rest of us have? There's also anxiety about abandonment, about being left behind. Gold is literally abandoned by the player. His save file sits on a cartridge nobody wanted, sold to GameStop, bought by a stranger. He's been discarded. And that resonates with people's fears about relationships, about being replaced, about someone moving on from you and never looking back. The game mechanically represents this. When you trade in a game, you're essentially abandoning these saved characters, erasing them, moving on to something new. Lost Silver asks what it feels like from their perspective. The story also engages with fears about mental deterioration. Gold's physical deterioration mirrors cognitive decline. Losing limbs is like losing capabilities. Becoming transparent is like becoming less present, or fading from reality. See, this can resonate with people who've watched loved ones suffer from diseases like Alzheimer's or dementia. The gradual loss of self. The way someone can be there physically but absent mentally. Gold exists but doesn't exist. He's present in the game but not really alive. It's a form of digital dementia, and there's existential dread. The story forces you to confront the meaninglessness of achievement in the face of death. Why do we strive? Why do we compete? Why do we try to be the best? If death comes for everyone eventually, if our accomplishments will be forgotten, what's the point? Gold represents the ultimate futility of ambition. He reached the pinnacle, and it didn't save him. It didn't make him immortal. It didn't even make him memorable. He still ended up alone in a grave. That's a genuinely horrifying philosophical position. There's a fascinating philosophical dimension to Lost Silver that we need to explore. Because this isn't just a spooky story about a haunted game. It's a meditation on what it means to be remembered and what happens when you're not. The Pokémon games have always operated on a specific logic, a fantasy where your achievements are permanent. When you become champion, your name goes in the Hall of Fame. When you catch a legendary Pokémon, it's registered in your Pokédex forever. The game preserves your progress, validates your accomplishments, tells you that yes, you matter. What you did matters, but Lost Silver asks, does it really? Because here's the uncomfortable truth the story forces us to confront. That cartridge sitting in GameStop's bargain bin, so that used copy of silver or gold or crystal, it belonged to someone once. Some kid who poured hundreds of hours into catching them all, Saint-Cure defeating every trainer, Baracer exploring every route. To that player, their save file was precious. It represented their journey, their team, their story. But to the store, to the person trading it in, to the buyer picking it up, it's just data to be wiped. Just empty space waiting for someone else's adventure. Lost Silver personifies this deletion, this erasure, as death itself. Gold isn't just a sprite in a corrupted game file. He's every player who ever thought their Pokémon journey mattered. Every kid who believed they were special for catching all 251 Pokémon. Every trainer who grinded to level 100 thinking it meant something permanent. And the story says, it didn't mean anything. You'll be forgotten. Your save will be deleted. Someone else will take your place, and the cycle continues forever. This nihilistic message hits especially hard for Pokémon fans because we develop genuine attachments to our teams. These aren't just collections of stats and sprites. We name them. We train them. We battle alongside them. We remember the clutch, critical hit that won a tough gym battle. We remember the first time our starter evolved. We remember catching that one legendary after 50 soft resets. These are our memories, our experiences, our emotional investments. And Lost Silver forces us to imagine those memories rotting away, those Pokémon dying, that emotional bond dissolving into corrupted data on an obsolete cartridge. The Unown are perfect vehicles for this message because they're already liminal creatures in the Pokémon universe. They exist in the ruins of Alph, an archaeological site filled with puzzles and ancient mysteries. The ruins themselves seem to exist outside normal space and time. When you solve the puzzles, you fall through floors into the underground chambers. The Unown radio plays that haunting melody. There's a sense that these Pokémon are connected to something old, something forgotten, something that predates the modern Pokémon world. They're literally shaped like letters, like language itself, like the building blocks of communication and memory. What better creatures to spell out messages about death and being forgotten? And think about what they spell in Lost Silver. Leave. The first warning. The game is telling you to abandon this journey before it's too late. But of course, you don't leave. Nobody leaves. Because we're curious. Because we need to know what comes next. Because turning back means admitting we're afraid. So we continue. And the messages become progressively darker. Hurry. IMDEAD. Dying. No more. IMDEAD. It's a countdown. A progression from warning to aftermath. From possibility to inevitability. From life to death. The genius is that these messages are passive. The Unown aren't attacking you. They're not enemy Pokémon to be defeated. They're just telling you what's happening. Reporting on your condition like witnesses to an accident. Leave became hurry. Became IMDEAD. You ignored the warning. You didn't hurry. And now something has died. Dying tells you it's still happening. The decay is ongoing. No more announces we're approaching the end. And IMDEAD is the final admission. The acceptance. The epitaph. Now let's talk about the broader context of Pokémon creepypastas. Because Lost Silver didn't emerge in a vacuum. It was part of a larger trend in the late 2000s and early 2010s, where people were creating horror stories based on beloved children's franchises. Taking something innocent and wholesome, and revealing the darkness hidden beneath. Pokémon was a particularly fertile ground for this, because the games had always contained small, unsettling elements if you looked close enough. Lavender Town, for instance. That infamous location in Pokémon Red and Blue where the Pokémon Tower serves as a graveyard for dead Pokémon. The music is eerie, high-pitched, and melancholic. You encounter ghost-type Pokémon. There's a literal ghost of Marowak whose mother was killed by Team Rocket. The game acknowledges that Pokémon can die. that they have funerals, that mourning is part of this world. And there were rumors, urban legends that spread in schoolyards long before the internet, about Lavender Town's music causing illness or even deaths among children in Japan. The Lavender Town Syndrome became one of gaming's most persistent creepy legends. So when creepypasta culture exploded online, Pokémon was already primed for horror reinterpretation. Stories like Pokémon Black emerged, describing a bootleg game where you could choose a ghost-type starter that eventually kills other Pokémon permanently. Strangled Red told the story of a trainer who accidentally kills his Charizard and descends into madness. Easter egg. Snow on Matte Silver explored what happened to Red before his iconic appearance in Gold and Silver, suggesting something dark and tragic. Each of these stories took the familiar Pokémon formula and twisted it, made it darker, made it real. But Lost Silver stood out among these pastas for several reasons. First, it was incredibly well written. The original post had excellent pacing. It didn't rush. It let the dread build naturally. The narrator's confusion and growing horror felt authentic. The descriptions were vivid, but not overwrought. It struck that perfect balance where you could believe this might have actually happened, that someone really could have found this cartridge and experienced these events. Second, Lost Silver had layers. On the surface, it's a haunted game story, digital ghosts and glitched Pokémon. Classic creepypasta fare. But beneath that, it's exploring genuine existential themes. The fear of being forgotten, the meaninglessness of achievement, the inevitability of death. You could analyze Lost Silver as a work of literature and find actual depth there. It wasn't just trying to scare you with blood and gore. It was trying to make you uncomfortable with deeper truths. Third, it was verifiable in a weird way. The story didn't ask you to believe in supernatural elements. Everything described could theoretically exist as a ROM hack. Someone with programming skills really could create a modified version of Pokémon Silver that did all these things. Germop. Change sprites to remove limbs. Modified text to spell words with Unown. Buffbound created custom battle sequences. Vegas programmed new music. The ambiguity between haunted cartridge and elaborate hack made the story more believable, more grounded, even as it explored supernatural themes. And fourth, it became real. Reed Maxwell actually created the game. You could download it and play it yourself. Read out or you all experience the horror firsthand. This was unprecedented. Other creepypastas remained stories, text on a screen that you read and imagined. But Lost Silver transcended its medium. It became tangible. It became something you could interact with. And playing the game, seeing those sprites deteriorate, reading those unknown messages yourself, fighting that battle with Red. It made the story more impactful than reading ever could. The fan game created a feedback loop that amplified Lost Silver's cultural impact. People would read the creepypasta, get intrigued, then play the game. Or they'd play the game first, then read the original story. Either way, the story and the game reinforced each other, made each other more memorable. and people would share their experiences. YouTube became filled with let's play videos of lost silver. Gamers recording themselves playing through the fan game, reacting to the disturbing imagery, theorizing about the meaning. Iskaridi, each video became a form of word-of-mouth marketing, spreading the story further. But beyond the mechanics of its popularity, we need to ask why Lost Silver specifically resonated so deeply. What nerve did it hit? Why did this particular Pokémon creepypasta become more famous than others? Why do people still talk about it over 14 years after its original posting? Part of it is generational. The people who read Lost Silver in 2010 were mostly millennials and older Gen Z. People who grew up with Pokémon Red, Blue, Gold, and Silver. These were our childhood games, our introduction to gaming, our first taste of this massive multimedia franchise that would define youth culture for decades. We have powerful nostalgia for these games. They represent a time of innocence, of simple joys, of summers spent trading Pokemon with friends and arguing about whether Charizard or Blastoise was better. Lost Silver preys on that nostalgia. Man, it takes these warm memories and corrupts them, shows us that the places we remember as safe and joyful, New Barktown, Sprout Tower, Mint Silver, can be sites of horror. That the creatures we loved, Cyndaquil, Celebi, Pikachu, can die in horrible ways. That the achievements we were proud of, catching them all, defeating Red, were ultimately meaningless. It's a story about lost innocence, about growing up and realizing that the things that mattered to us as children don't matter anymore, about becoming the forgotten save file on a used cartridge. This hits especially hard when you're in your late teens or early 20s, which many of Lost Silver's original readers were. The transitional period where you're no longer a kid, but not quite an adult. Around where you're watching your childhood slip away. Where you're starting to understand mortality in a more personal way. Where you're wondering if you'll make a lasting impact or be forgotten. True? Lost Silver speaks directly to those anxieties. On Meat uses the language of Pokémon, this innocent children's game, to explore very adult fears. There's also something compelling about the specific way the story handles death. Most horror focuses on the moment of death itself. The violence, the pain, the fear right before the end. But Lost Silver is more interested in what comes after, the aftermath, being dead, but not gone. Existing as a ghost, trapped in the place where you died, unable to move on, unable to find peace. That's a different kind of horror. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of what death might be like. Consciousness without release, awareness without agency, existing forever in a state of decay. Gold's gradual deterioration visualizes this perfectly. He doesn't die suddenly in one dramatic moment. Instead, he loses pieces of himself bit by bit. First, his color drains away. Then he loses his arms. Then his legs. Then his entire body until only his head remains. Then even that becomes transparent. And finally, he disappears entirely, leaving only the grave. It's death as a process rather than an event. Death is something that erodes you piece by piece until nothing remains. This mirrors how we actually experience loss in real life. When someone dies, they don't disappear immediately from our lives. We remember them. We think about them. We see traces of them in photos, in possessions, and memories. But gradually, those traces fade. We think of them less often. The memories become hazier. The grief dulls until eventually they're truly gone. Not just dead, but forgotten. And Lost Silver suggests that maybe, on some level, the dead are aware of this fading. Maybe they can feel themselves being forgotten. Maybe that's its own special kind of hell. The relationship between red and gold in this story adds another layer of meaning. Butter in the original Pokémon Gold and Silver. Battling Red at the top of Mint Silver is this legendary moment. He's the strongest trainer in the game. Your character from the previous generation. The original Pokémon Master. Beating him is supposed to prove that you've surpassed the previous generation. That you're the new champion. The new hero. But Lost Silver reimagines this encounter. Red is already dead. A transparent ghost. His Pikachu is level 255 and crying, using frustration. A move powered by hatred for its trainer. This suggests that Red's story didn't end well. That whatever happened on Mint Silver, it wasn't glorious. It was tragic. Maybe Red pushed himself too hard. Maybe his Pokémon suffered because of his ambition. Maybe achieving everything came at too high a cost. And when Gold defeats this ghostly Red, or rather, when they destroy each other simultaneously with Perish Song and Destiny Bond, it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like two broken things destroying each other out of mutual pain. Red isn't an obstacle to overcome. He's a warning of what Gold will become. A preview of Gold's own future. Both trainers achieved everything. Both became champions. Both were forgotten. Both died alone. The battle is less about proving superiority and more about recognizing kinship in tragedy. Some interpretations of Lost Silver suggest that Red might have even caused Gold's death somehow. That their encounter on Mint Silver in the original games had consequences the game didn't show us. Maybe defeating Red, taking his title as the strongest trainer, cursed Gold somehow. Maybe there was always a price for being the best. Maybe that's why the badge count keeps increasing beyond 16. Each achievement brings Gold closer to death. More badges, more success, more decay. The fan game's additional routes explore these ideas further. In Ashes, we learn about Celebai's backstory. This time-traveling mythical Pokémon was burned by Ho-Oh's sacred fire. Split in half. Turned into something between life and death. It can still travel through time, but it exists in constant pain. Constantly dying, but never dead. And it chose to stay with Gold despite this suffering. Or maybe it's trapped with him. Maybe they're bound together by their shared state of living death. Ho-Oh is interesting here because in the original games, it's the symbol of hope and resurrection. The legendary Pokémon that brought the Burn Tower's 3 Pokémon back to life as Raikou, Entei, and Suicune. It represents rebirth, renewal, But in Lost Silver's universe, Ho-Oh's flames don't bring life. They bring this horrible half-existence. They create ghosts. It's a corruption of the original symbolism, turning hope into horror. The Ruins route focuses on forever. The Houndoom. Houndoom is a dark and fire type associated with hell in its Pokédex entries. The flames it breathes supposedly cause pain that never stops. It's a Pokémon of eternal suffering. But in Lost Silver, Forever seems to be trying to guide Gold, leading him through the ruins of Alph, maybe trying to help him find peace. The unowned spell die in this route, which sounds threatening, but maybe it's merciful. Maybe Forever's trying to help Gold truly die, to stop existing in this liminal state and finally rest. And then there's Silver, Gold's rival, in the Ruins route. Silver appears with unowned spelling, sorry. He sends out a low-level Totodile, a starter Pokémon. This is Silver trying to go back to the beginning, to undo whatever he did wrong. His sprite becomes mutilated after the battle, suggesting he's paying for something. Maybe his rivalry with Gold was too harsh. Maybe his words pushed Gold over the edge. Maybe he contributed to Gold's death in some way. And now he's trapped in his own cycle of guilt and punishment. These additional routes transform Lost Silver from a simple haunted game story into something more complex. Made a mythology. A universe where multiple characters are trapped in cycles of suffering. Where death isn't an ending but a new form of existence. Where the afterlife is just playing Pokemon forever in increasingly degraded conditions. It's hell. But it's a very specific kind of hell. One where you're forced to relive your achievements while they slowly lose all meaning. The technical aspects of how Lost Silver tells its story deserve analysis too. And because the medium is crucial here. This story only works as a creepypasta about a Pokémon game. It couldn't be adapted to another format without losing essential elements. No, the player's agency, or lack thereof, is central to the horror. You boot up the game expecting to play, expecting to make choices. But the game has already been played. The save file exists. You're not creating a new story. You're witnessing the aftermath of someone else's story. And as you play, your agency gets stripped away piece by piece. First, you can't restart because the game defaults to the save file. Then you can't escape Sprout Tower through normal means. Then your items are gone, so you can't use an escape rope. Then in the battle with Red, you can't access items or switch Pokemon. You can only use attacks, and Celebi only knows one move. So you're forced to use Perish Song. Forced to engage in mutual destruction. Sershi, you're not playing the game anymore. You're watching it play itself. You're a passenger in someone else's nightmare. This is horror through loss of control. Through watching helplessly as terrible things happen. You can't save these Pokemon. You can't help Gold. You can't change the outcome. All you can do is move forward, following the only path available, toward an ending you can't prevent. It's the horror of inevitability, of fate, of knowing exactly where this is going and being unable to stop it. The silence plays a major role too. Pokemon games are normally filled with sound. The cheerful music of routes and towns, the dramatic battle themes, the cries of Pokemon, menu sounds, footstep sounds. The games feel alive because of their audio landscape. But Lost Silver strips most of this away. The Pokemon make no cries. The music is wrong when it exists at all. Long stretches have no sound, just silence. And silence in a medium that's supposed to be filled with sound is deeply unsettling. It makes the world feel dead, abandoned, like you're walking through a corpse. When music does play, it's distorted. The Unown radio theme, the pokey flute music that plays wrong, in the fan game's hidden route. Familiar Pokemon Silver songs are slowed down and had notes removed, creating these hollow echoes of melodies you remember. It's like listening to music play in an empty house. You recognize the tune, but it's wrong now, changed, corrupted. The nostalgia you feel hearing these songs gets immediately inverted into discomfort. The visual deterioration mirrors this audio decay. Bow, gold sprite losing pieces, colors draining away, transparency increasing. It's not just storytelling. It's the game itself breaking down. The graphical fidelity degrading, as if the cartridge is literally dying as you play it. This creates a meta-textual horror. You're not just watching gold die, you're watching the game die. The medium itself is corrupted, and there's something deeply unsettling about seeing Pokemon sprites modified in these ways. Axmein. We're used to these sprites looking specific ways. Cyndaquil is supposed to have its flame burning bright. Celebi is supposed to be whole. Pikachu is supposed to be cheerful. These images are burned into our collective memory from hundreds of hours of gameplay. So when Lost Silver shows us Cyndaquil without its flame, Celebi cut in half, Pikachu crying, it's viscerally wrong. It triggers this immediate revulsion because it's violating something we know at an instinctive level. This is the power of corruption horror. Taking something familiar and making it wrong. Not creating something entirely new and scary, but twisting something known into something horrible. It's why corrupted versions of beloved characters are so effective in horror. Why evil versions of Mickey Mouse or Twisted takes on children's shows disturb us, because they're using our own nostalgia and affection against us, making us afraid of things we love. Lost Silver does this to the entire Pokémon experience. It takes this game we remember fondly, this world we felt safe in, and it shows us the darkness we never noticed. The Pokémon graves were always in Lavender Town. The ghost of Marowak was always there. The game always implied that Pokémon could die. We just ignored it because the overall tone was so cheerful. Because our Pokémon never died. They just fainted. Because the sad parts were small compared to the joyful adventure. Lost Silver forces us to confront what we ignored, to imagine what happens to Pokémon who lose in battle and their trainer has no money for the Pokémon Center. Bawadal. To wonder what happens to Pokémon whose trainers abandon them. Boskrokos. To consider that maybe this world we remember as bright and hopeful has always had a darker undercurrent. That maybe the reason there are so many orphan children becoming Pokémon trainers at 10 years old is because something happened to their parents. That maybe the reason there are so many villainous teams is because the world isn't as perfect as we remember. It's a deconstruction of the Pokémon formula, but not in an obnoxious edgelord way that just adds blood and swearing. Lost Silver maintains the aesthetic and tone of the original games. It uses the actual game's graphics and mechanics. It doesn't need to show graphic violence or explicit gore. The horror comes from implication, from absence, from the slow realization that something is fundamentally wrong. The story's impact on creepypasta culture more broadly is worth considering. Lost Silver set a template that other gaming creepypastas would follow. The haunted game cartridge subgenre was already established before Lost Silver. Stories like Ben Drowned about a haunted Majora's Mask cartridge had already achieved popularity. But Lost Silver showed how to elevate the formula, how to add thematic depth, how to make the horror personal rather than just shocking. After Lost Silver, gaming creepypastas got more sophisticated. Writers realized you didn't need to just describe scary things happening. You could use the game as a medium to explore ideas, to make statements about gaming culture, about nostalgia, about mortality and legacy. Lost Silver proved that creepypasta could be literary, that it could make you think while it made you uncomfortable. The story also demonstrated the power of community collaboration. The original anonymous poster created the text. Reed Maxwell created the game. Bro. The original author wrote additional content for the hidden route. Artists created visual interpretations. Musicians created soundtrack variations. YouTube narrators gave it voice. Let's Players made videos. Theorists analyzed the symbolism. Each person added to Lost Silver's mythology, expanded its universe, made it richer and more complex. This is unique to internet culture. Traditional storytelling involves a single author or creative team producing a finished work. But Lost Silver evolved organically through community participation. It's a collectively constructed narrative. Folk horror for the digital age. No single person owns Lost Silver completely. The anonymous original author set it in motion, but the community gave it life, transformed it from a text post into a multimedia phenomenon, and it keeps evolving. Read Lost Silver in 2020. New routes, updated graphics, refined storytelling. A decade after the original posting, Lost Silver was still growing, still being expanded. Cat still finding new audiences. That's remarkable longevity for an internet horror story. Most creepypastas have a brief moment of popularity and then fade. But Lost Silver endures. Part of this endurance comes from its thematics. The fears it explores don't age. Everyone fears being forgotten. Everyone worries their accomplishments don't matter. Everyone confronts mortality eventually. These are universal human anxieties. So even though the specific medium is Pokémon Silver, a game from 1999, the underlying message remains relevant. Each new generation discovers Lost Silver and finds it speaks to them. There's something we should discuss about the nature of ghosts in the Pokémon universe. Because Lost Silver isn't just using ghost imagery arbitrarily. It's engaging with how the Pokémon games themselves conceptualize death and the afterlife. Ghost-type Pokémon have always been weird anomalies in this otherwise cheerful world. They're explicitly dead or supernatural entities. Ghastly is literally a poisonous gas with a soul. Haunter is described as hiding in darkness and licking victims to steal their life force. Gengar was supposedly created when a human's shadow gained life. These are dark concepts for a kid's game, and then there's the Pokémon Tower in Lavender Town. This entire location is a graveyard, a place where trainers bring their deceased Pokémon to be buried and mourned. You can read the gravestones. Here lies a Pokémon at rest. May its soul rest in peace. The game explicitly acknowledges that Pokémon have souls, that they can truly die, that death is permanent and final. This isn't just fainting in battle. This is actual death requiring burial and mourning. Lost Silver takes this lore seriously, more seriously than the games themselves do, because the games present these dark elements, but then immediately return to the cheerful adventure. Your Pokémon might visit graveyards, but they never die permanently. You might battle ghost types, but the horror is kept surface level. The games want it both ways. Although they want the slight edge that comes from acknowledging death, but they don't want to actually disturb their young audience. Lost Silver says, "What if we took this seriously? What if Pokémon could actually die in your care? What would that look like? How would that feel?" And the answer the story provides is horrifying. When Cyndaquil dies, when it says, "Hurry has fainted," but the Pokémon is actually gone from your party forever, it's devastating. When Celebi dies in that battle, when the text says, "has died," instead of fainted, it makes that distinction explicit and final. The game mechanics themselves become horror. In normal Pokémon, though, fainting is just a temporary status. You go to a Pokémon Center, talk to Nurse Joy. Your Pokémon are instantly healed. It's a game mechanic that removes consequences. You can't lose your team. They're always recoverable. But Lost Silver removes this safety net. Death is permanent. The Pokémon Center doesn't exist in this world. Or if it does, it can't help. There's no resurrection, no recovery, just loss. This transforms the player's relationship with the game. Normal Pokémon games are power fantasies. You become stronger over time. Your team grows. You accumulate Pokémon and badges and money. The progression is always upward. But Lost Silver inverts this. Exoli, you don't get stronger, you get weaker. Your Pokémon die one by one. Your sprite deteriorates. Your badges increase, but it's not a sign of achievement. It's a countdown, a measure of how close you are to complete dissolution. And you can't stop it. There's no skill check you can pass to save Cyndaquil. No strategy to win the battle with red differently. No secret technique to prevent gold's decay. The story is on rails. The ending is inevitable. You're just pressing buttons to advance a predetermined tragedy. This removes the fundamental appeal of games. The idea that your choices matter, that your skill determines the outcome, that you have agency in this world. Lost Silver is an anti-game. It looks like Pokémon Silver. It uses Pokémon mechanics, but it removes everything that makes games satisfying. No progression, no victory, no agency, just inexorable decline toward death. It's an interactive meditation on futility. You play it not to win, but to witness, to understand, to confront uncomfortable truths about mortality and meaninglessness. This is why the fan game works so well as a companion to the Creepypasta. But reading about these events is disturbing, but playing through them yourself, pressing the buttons that make Gold walk toward his own grave, selecting Perish Song even though you know it will kill your Celebi, watching the sprite deteriorate because of your inputs. That creates a different level of involvement. You're complicit. You're making it happen, even though you have no real choice, even though the game would progress the same way regardless. The fact that you're the one pressing the buttons makes you feel responsible. This is interactive horror at its most effective, not jump scares or gore, but implicating the player in the tragedy, making them participate in something awful, forcing them to continue even when they want to stop. The game asks, are you going to see this through? Are you going to walk Gold to his grave? Are you going to read that final message? And most people do. Because we need closure. We need to see how it ends, even when we know the ending will hurt. Let's talk about the visual storytelling in the fan game's updated versions. Kasi, Re. Lost Silver takes the sprite work to a new level. The original fan game used simple edits of existing Pokémon Silver sprites, removing limbs, changing colors, adding transparency, effective but limited by the base graphics. Lost Silver rebuilds everything from scratch. The sprites are more detailed, more unsettling, more explicitly gruesome. Celebi split in half now shows internal anatomy. You can see organs, muscle tissue, bone. It's not just a sprite cut down the middle. It's a visualization of a living creature, bisected and somehow still alive, still conscious, still in pain. The shiny effect that plays when it appears isn't the gentle sparkles of a rare Pokémon. It's harsh and grating, like the Pokémon itself is screaming. Gold's deterioration is more gradual and detailed in Lost Silver. Vanishes. You can watch his skin turn gray. Migurus, see his arms become transparent at the edges before disappearing entirely. XD, watch his leg fade into nothingness. The bloody tears are more prominent, more explicitly disturbing. The final head-only sprite shows the black voids of his eyes in horrifying detail. Empty sockets that stare at nothing. A mouth, frozen in a silent scream. Red's beheaded sprite is also more graphic. The original fan game just showed his body without a head. Lost Silver shows the stump of his neck. The suggestion of violence. The indication that something terrible happened. It's still not gratuitously gory. The game doesn't show blood splattering everywhere, but it shows enough to make the horror concrete, to make it impossible to look away. Even the Unown get updated. In the hidden route, they have red eyes, glowing, staring, like they're not just letter-shaped Pokémon anymore. They're witnesses, observers, recording everything that happens. writing Gold's story in their own bodies. Kinder spelling out his fate one letter at a time. The red eyes suggest malevolence, or maybe just indifference. They're not trying to help. They're not trying to hurt. They're just documenting, reporting, existing as a record of something terrible. The environments in Re-Sorexit Lost Silver are also more detailed. Kakis. Sprout Tower doesn't just look empty, it looks abandoned. It's made decrepit. The wooden floors show age and damage. The walls have cracks. Everything is slightly wrong in ways that are hard to pinpoint but impossible to ignore. The red glow that fills the tower after using flash isn't just a color filter. It's lighting that creates shadows in impossible places. That makes the architecture look warped. That transforms a familiar location into something alien and threatening. The graveyard at the end is more expansive. More tombstones. More detail. Where you can see that these aren't just generic grave markers. They're graves for specific Pokémon. Each stone is slightly different, suggesting individual stories, individual losses. Gold isn't the only one who died here. This is a mass grave, a collective tomb for every Pokémon and trainer who achieved everything and was forgotten anyway. The soundtrack in Lost Silver deserves special mention. The original fan game used modified versions of Pokémon Silver's music, slowed down, with notes removed, creating these hollow echoes of familiar themes. Lost Silver takes this further. The music isn't just slow, it's degraded, like it's being played on a dying device. You can hear the audio quality deteriorating, static creeping in, notes warping and distorting. It sounds like the cartridge itself is breaking down as you play. The Unown radio theme, already eerie in the original game, becomes genuinely disturbing in Lost Silver. It's stretched out, made even slower. The notes hang in the air longer than they should, creating this sense of time moving wrong, of being trapped in a moment that should have passed. It's music that makes you want to leave, but you can't. You have to keep playing, keep listening, keep moving forward through this sonic nightmare. The silence is used strategically too. Long stretches where there's no music at all, just the sound effects of footsteps and menu beeps, and even those start to disappear until you're walking through sections of the game with no audio whatsoever. Complete silence. And that silence is louder than any music could be. It's the absence of life. The sound of a dead world, of a game that's stopped functioning, of an adventure that's ended. When music returns after these silent sections, it's almost a relief. Even though the music is disturbing, even though it's wrong, it's still something, still sound in the void, until that too is taken away. Until the final sections where silence reigns absolutely, where Gold walks through black emptiness without any audio accompaniment, just the visual of his deteriorating sprite moving through darkness. It's minimalist horror, stripping away every comfort until only the essential terror remains. Let's examine the symbolism of specific Pokémon choices in Lost Silver. Why Cyndaquil? Why Celebi? Why Pikachu? These aren't random selections. Each Pokémon serves a specific narrative and symbolic purpose. Cyndaquil is one of the 3 starters in Pokémon Gold and Silver. Setting the Fire-type option. For many players, Cyndaquil was their first partner, the Pokémon they chose at the beginning of their Johto journey. It represents the start of the adventure, hope, potential. That moment when everything is possible and nothing has gone wrong yet. So when Hurry dies early in Lost Silver, when Cyndaquil is the first casualty, it's killing that hope, destroying the beginning, saying that this adventure was doomed from the start. The name Hurry adds urgency, like the Pokémon itself is trying to warn you, trying to get you to leave before it's too late. But you can't hurry. The game controls the pace, and Hurry dies despite its warning, despite its desperate attempt to escape. The name becomes tragic in hindsight, a plea that went unheeded, a warning that couldn't save anyone. Celebi is more complex. This is a mythical Pokémon, incredibly rare. In the actual games, Celebi could only be obtained through special events. Named, it's a time traveler, described in the Pokédex as wandering through time. Matt and Bert appearing from the future or past. It exists outside normal temporal flow. So having a Celebi in Lost Silver implies something about the nature of this haunted cartridge. Maybe it exists outside normal time too. Maybe Gold is trapped in a temporal loop, dying over and over, Celebi bearing witness to every iteration. The fact that this Celebi is shiny makes it even rarer. Shiny Pokémon are special color variants, extremely uncommon. Many players could go through entire playthroughs without ever seeing one. A shiny mythical Pokémon is possibly the rarest thing in the game, the ultimate achievement for a collector. So Gold having one proves he really did achieve everything. He obtained the rarest of the rare. He was a true Pokémon master, and it didn't matter. He died anyway. Even possessing something this special couldn't save him, couldn't give his life meaning, couldn't prevent him from being forgotten, that the Celebi is cut in half, burned by Ho-Oh's sacred fire in the Ashes root, adds another layer. Ho-Oh is supposed to be this symbol of hope and rebirth, the legendary Pokémon that saved the 3 beasts from the burning brass tower. But it hurt Celebi, damaged it beyond repair. This inverts Ho-Oh's symbolism, makes it destructive rather than healing, suggests that sometimes the things meant to save us only cause more pain. And Celebi being split in half, existing as half a creature, mirrors Gold's own state. He's half dead, existing between life and death, neither fully alive nor fully gone. Celebi is his perfect partner, another being trapped in an impossible state, both of them deteriorating but unable to die completely, stuck in perpetual limbo. The fact that Celebi knows only Perish Song is darkly appropriate. A time traveler who can only sing about death. A creature that exists outside time, reduced to counting down 3 turns to mutual destruction. Perish Song doesn't discriminate. It kills the user and the target. It's a move about accepting that death comes for everyone, that no one escapes, not even mythical Pokémon, not even creatures that can travel through time. Pikachu's inclusion brings in the entire weight of Pokemon's cultural significance. Pikachu is the Pokémon, the mascot of the entire franchise. The one creature everyone recognizes even if they've never played the games. Red's Pikachu in Gold and Silver is special because it's implied to be the same Pikachu from Pokémon Yellow, the one that followed Red around. The starter that wasn't Charmander, Squirtle, or Bulbasaur, Red's most loyal partner. So showing this Pikachu at level 255, crying, using frustration, is devastating. This isn't just any Pikachu. This is an icon, corrupted. This is the symbol of Pokemon itself, in pain. Hating its trainer, the move frustration explicitly becomes more powerful the less the Pokemon likes its trainer. So Pikachu using frustration for massive damage means it absolutely despises Red. The most famous trainer-Pokemon partnership in the franchise. Revealed to be built on hatred and suffering. Level 255 is significant too. That's the maximum level the game's code can handle. It's an impossible level, unreachable through normal gameplay. You'd have to use cheating devices or glitches to get a Pokemon to level 255. So Red having a level 255 Pikachu suggests he pushed beyond all limits, broke the rules of the game itself, achieved something impossible, and it made his Pokemon hate him. Power at any cost, victory that destroyed everything it was meant to protect. The tears in Pikachu's sprite are simple but effective. Just a few pixels suggesting moisture on the cheeks. But they transform the entire image. Pikachu is usually cheerful, energetic, happy. Seeing it cry breaks that expectation, suggests deep suffering, emotional pain that can't be hidden. And this Pikachu has to fight, has to use its hatred as a weapon, has to hurt others because it's been hurt. It's a cycle of abuse visualized through Pokemon sprites. When both Celebi and Pikachu die using Perish Song and Destiny Bond, it's almost merciful. Best main. They're both ending their suffering, choosing death over continued existence in pain. It's a mutual suicide pact. Both Pokemon destroying themselves and each other to escape their torment. The battle isn't really about Gold versus Red. It's about two tortured creatures finally finding release. The progression of Red's sprite is worth analyzing too. He starts transparent, already a ghost. Then after the battle he appears and says nothing. Just ellipses. No final words. No wisdom to impart. No closure. Just silence. And then he's beheaded. The ultimate silencing. Whatever Red might have said, whatever warning he might have given, is cut off forever, literally separated from his body. This connects to the theme of being forgotten. Red is remembered as the silent protagonist, the strong trainer who waits at the top of Mint Silver. But Lost Silver suggests his silence isn't cool mystique. It's trauma. It's the inability to speak about what happened to him. And then he loses even the potential to speak. Becomes fully voiceless. Just a headless body. A warning that can't warn anyone. The badge system's progression in Lost Silver is one of its most discussed mysteries, starting at 16, which is correct. 8 Johto badges plus 8 Kanto badges. But then it increases to 24 then 32, then 40. What do these numbers mean? One interpretation is that they represent doubling. 16 to 32 is exactly double. This could suggest Gold's achievements are being counted twice, once in life and once in death. Or it could mean he's trapped in a cycle where his accomplishments replay endlessly, each iteration adding to the total, the badges accumulating across multiple loops through time. Another theory is that the numbers represent progression toward complete disintegration. Each increase marks another stage of decay. 16 is normal Gold, 24 is Gold missing arms, 32 is Gold missing legs, 40 is Gold reduced to just a head. The badges count not achievements, but losses. Each badge is a piece of gold stripped away. Some fans note that the numbers follow a pattern if you look at them differently. 16. 24 is 16 plus 8. Yin White, 32 is 24 plus 8. 40 is 32 plus 8. Wadi, so the progression is plus 8 each time. 8 badges per region in the normal game. Maybe Gold is traveling through additional regions that don't exist. Ghost regions, dead worlds, collecting badges in the afterlife, continuing his quest even in death because he doesn't know how to stop. Or perhaps the numbers are completely arbitrary, meaningless, increasing randomly to show that the game's logic has broken down, that rules don't apply anymore, such that we're beyond normal gameplay into something else entirely. The impossibility of 40 badges mirrors the impossibility of level 255 Pikachu, the impossibility of Pokémon dying permanently, the impossibility of a trainer decaying into a ghost. It's all impossible, but it's happening anyway. The badge count might also represent Gold's desperate attempt to matter. If 40 badges are better than 16, then maybe he'll be remembered. Best way, maybe he'll be significant. Maybe his achievements will mean something if he just achieves more. But it doesn't work. Because no amount of badges can prevent death. Mazlikston can prevent being forgotten, can give meaning to an ultimately meaningless existence. Gold can collect all the badges in all the regions, real and imagined, and he'll still end up in an unmarked grave. The 3 dots name is one of Lost Silver's most brilliant touches. Bis. Because it's both maximally simple and deeply meaningful. 3 dots, an ellipsis, a pause, an unfinished thought. In writing, ellipses indicate something trailing off, and something left unsaid, or a moment of silence, breaking of hesitation. Naming the trainer, this creates immediate unease, because trainers should have names. Chaush, they should have identities. The first thing you do in any Pokemon game is name yourself. Choose who you want to be in this world. But this trainer is nameless. Or rather, they're named nothing. Named absence. Named the space where a name should be. It could represent Gold's identity being erased. Maybe he had a name once, but through death and decay and being forgotten, it was stripped away, until only these 3 dots remain. A placeholder, a blank space, an empty field in a database. Or maybe Gold never had a name. Maybe he was always just 3 dots, always anonymous, always nobody. He achieved everything, caught every Pokemon, earned every badge, became champion, defeated Red, and through all of it he was nameless, unknown, just another face, just another trainer, not special despite his accomplishments. The story's narrator even acknowledges this. They initially think the 3 dots show lack of originality, like the previous player couldn't be bothered to choose a real name. But as the story progresses, the 3 dots become more sinister, more meaningful. They're not carelessness, they're erasure. They're Gold's entire identity reduced to punctuation. When the final gravestone appears, it reads R.I.P. Rest in peace. 3 dots. Even in death, even on his own tombstone. Gold doesn't get a name. He's buried anonymously, remembered as nothing. His entire life reduced to 3 dots on a headstone that nobody visits. The hidden route changes this slightly in the fan game. The final message becomes R.I.P. PKMN Trainer Gold, finally giving him back his name, acknowledging his identity. But only in the alternate route. Only if you make specific choices. In the main path, he stays nameless forever. The name Gold that the narrator uses, that we use when discussing the story, is never actually confirmed in the original route. In the book, it's an assumption, a guess. Maybe his name really was Gold. Or maybe that's just what we call him because we need to call him something. Because we can't handle the idea of someone being truly nameless. The concept of the haunted cartridge itself deserves deeper examination. Because this trope has become such a staple of creepypasta, but Lost Silver uses it in a specific way that comments on video game preservation and memory. Think about what a game cartridge represents. It's a physical object that contains digital worlds. Entire adventures compressed into a small plastic case. For children growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, cartridges were precious. They held your save files, your progress, your accomplishments. Losing a cartridge meant losing hundreds of hours of gameplay. Losing Pokémon you'd trained. Losing memories. But cartridges degrade. The battery that maintains the save file eventually dies. The contacts corrode. The plastic cracks. These things aren't eternal. They're temporary vessels for temporary data. And when they break, everything stored inside is lost forever, unless you've transferred it somewhere else, backed it up somehow. It's just gone, as if it never existed. Lost Silver takes this mundane horror of data loss and makes it literal. The cartridge isn't just malfunctioning, it's dying. And the data inside Gold and his Pokémon are dying with it. They're aware of their deterioration. They can feel the cartridge breaking down around them. The glitches aren't random. They're symptoms, signs of digital death. The sprites losing definition. The music degrading. The world becoming more and more corrupted. It's all the cartridge slowly failing. This makes the player's experience of Lost Silver more meta than they might realize. You're not just playing a spooky game, you're watching a game die. Participating in its final moments, walking through a digital world in the process of collapsing. Every glitch you encounter, every strange sprite, every corrupted sound, is the game crying out, showing you its wounds, asking you to witness its death. And there's something deeply sad about that. This game, even though it's fictional, even though it's a creepypasta creation, represents all the real games that have died. All the cartridges whose batteries ran out. All the save files that corrupted. All the memories that disappeared. Lost Silver isn't just about gold being forgotten. It's about the games themselves being forgotten. About how the things we loved and poured time into eventually break down. Eventually become unplayable. Eventually cease to exist. The used GameStop cartridge adds another layer to this. Because GameStop became notorious for buying used games cheaply and reselling them. They'd wipe the save data, remove any trace of the previous owner, make the game new for the next buyer. This practice always had a casual cruelty to it. Someone's adventure, someone's accomplishments, wiped clean with no thought to their value. To GameStop, it's just inventory. It's just products to move. But to the original owner, that data might have meant something. Lost Silver imagines what if the data couldn't be fully wiped? What if something remained? What if Gold's ghost persisted despite GameStop's attempts to erase him? What if he's haunting the cartridge because he refuses to be forgotten? Because he needs someone to know he existed, that he achieved things, that he was here. The game defaults to his save file not because of a glitch, but because he won't let it do anything else. Won't let another player overwrite him. He forces you to witness his story, to walk through his death, to acknowledge his existence even if you can't save him. This transforms Lost Silver from a simple horror story into something more poignant. It becomes a ghost story in the truest sense. A story about something that can't rest. Something that lingers because it has unfinished business. Gold's unfinished business is being remembered, being acknowledged, having his story told. And by playing the game, by reading the Creepypasta, by talking about Lost Silver, we're fulfilling that need. We're giving Gold what he wanted. We're remembering him. Millions of people know about Lost Silver now. Know about Gold and his nameless grave. In a twisted way, he achieved the immortality he couldn't achieve in life. The new Bark Town sequence near the end of Lost Silver is particularly poignant. Because New Bark Town is where every Johto journey begins. It's your hometown, where your mother lives, where your rival lives, where Professor Elm's lab is. It's the starting point. The place you always come back to between adventures. In the regular games, you can always return home. Your mother will be there. She'll save your money. She'll heal your Pokémon. She represents safety, comfort, the one constant in your journey. But when Gold returns to New Barktown in Lost Silver, nobody's there. The house is empty. His mother is gone. Either she died, or she moved away, or she never existed. Gold comes home and finds that home doesn't exist anymore. That the safe place he remembered is just another empty building. Just more abandoned architecture in a dying world. He has nowhere to return to, no comfort waiting, no rest, just an empty house in a dead town. And when he walks outside, New Barktown itself is gone. Just blackness. Void. The world has been erased. Or maybe it was never there to begin with. Maybe the town was just a memory. A dream of home that dissolves when you try to return to it. You can't go home again. Literally. Home doesn't exist anymore. It's been swallowed by the darkness that's consumed everything else. This sequence hits hard for anyone who's ever tried to return to somewhere they once belonged. Childhood homes sold to new families. Hometowns that changed while you were away. Places that felt eternal when you were young, but turned out to be as temporary as everything else. The horror isn't just that New Barktown is gone. It's that Gold probably didn't realize it was gone until he tried to go back. He was working from memory, from how things used to be. And memory lied. Memory showed him a home that no longer existed. Maybe never existed the way he remembered it. The encounter with Gold's regular sprite is fascinating, because throughout the game, you've been controlling Gold's deteriorating sprite, watching it lose pieces, watching it become transparent, watching it fade. But then you meet Gold's regular sprite, the normal, complete, colorful version, standing in the void, and he says goodbye forever and vanishes. Who is this? Is it a memory? Gold remembering what he used to be? Is it his last moment of life? The ghost meeting his living self? Is it another trainer? Another version of Gold from a different timeline or game? The story doesn't explain. It just presents this image of completeness appearing briefly before disappearing forever. It's almost like Gold is saying goodbye to himself, to who he was, accepting that he's not that person anymore, that he'll never be that person again. The space between forever and the ellipsis is significant. Goodbye forever, not goodbye forever. There's a gap, like the sentence itself is breaking apart. Like even language is failing. The grammar is literally falling apart. Words separating from punctuation. Everything dissolving. And then, used nightmare. An unknown entity using a move that damages sleeping Pokémon. But Gold isn't asleep, unless this entire experience has been a nightmare. Unless death is the nightmare. Unless Gold has been trapped in a nightmare this whole time and only now. Only at the very end does the move finally land. Finally end the dream. Deary, finally let him wake up, or stop dreaming entirely. The final grave is the culmination of everything Lost Silver has been building toward. That small room surrounded by graves. Barote, the Unown spelling IMDEAD, the walls closing in, the text reading RIP, everything contracting down to this one moment, this one truth. Gold is dead. He's been dead. This entire journey has been his death. Not the moment of death, but the state of death. The existence of being dead. And now, finally, he's acknowledging it, accepting it, saying it explicitly. I'm dead. But he still can't rest. The game doesn't end. You're stuck looking at the grave, unable to move, unable to do anything, forced to stare at this ending forever, until you physically turn off the Game Boy, until you break the connection. until you walk away. New and gold is trapped. But so are you. The only way to escape is to stop playing. But no man green to give up. To admit defeat, it makes the game wins by making itself unplayable. Ningxi by forcing you to abandon it just like gold was abandoned. Some players reported that even after resetting, even after starting over, the game loads back to the same screen, the grave, the message, the trapped state, like the cartridge is locked in the moment, like that's all it can display now. The game has become gold's grave. The entire cartridge is a tombstone, Tyran, and every time you boot it up, you're just visiting the grave, reading the inscription, acknowledging the death. That's all you can do. This permanent state speaks to how trauma works, how grief works. You don't process it and move on. Not really. You just get stuck sometimes. Return to the moment of loss. Find yourself unable to think about anything else. The grave becomes your entire world. You walk around it, examine it from every angle, but you can't leave, can't escape, can't move forward. Lost Silver literalizes this psychological state, makes it a game mechanic. You're trapped in grief, forced to stare at loss, unable to continue. The broader implications of Lost Silver for Pokémon as a franchise are interesting to consider, because Pokémon is a series built on permanence. Your caught Pokémon stay caught, your trained team levels remain, your progress is saved and preserved. The games create the illusion that your achievements matter, that they last, that you're building something meaningful. But Lost Silver asks, do they really last? Every Pokémon game eventually ends. Every save file eventually gets deleted or corrupted. Every cartridge eventually stops working. The servers for trading and battling online eventually shut down. The entire infrastructure that makes these games function is temporary. Your level 100 Charizard will eventually cease to exist. Not because it died in battle, but because the technology that allows it to exist will fail, and future generations won't know about your specific playthrough, won't know about your team, won't know that you caught every Pokémon or defeated every trainer. They'll play their own versions, have their own adventures, and your specific experience will be forgotten, lost to time like Gold's story would have been forgotten if not for this creepypasta preserving it. This makes Lost Silver a commentary on the franchise itself, on how Pokémon, for all its themes of friendship and lasting bonds, is ultimately about experiences that don't last, about moments that exist only in memory, about achievements that matter only as long as the technology supporting them continues to function. It's not cynical exactly, it's just honest, acknowledging what the games themselves can't acknowledge, that this is all temporary, that we're all temporary, that the Pokémon world, no matter how much we love it, will eventually fade just like everything else. But there's something beautiful in that temporariness too. Because Lost Silver exists. Because people cared enough about Pokémon to create this story. To make the fan game. To write analysis. To draw fan art. To keep the story alive. Gold might be forgotten in the narrative of Lost Silver, but Lost Silver itself is remembered. The community preserved it, passed it down, made it part of Pokémon lore. Not official lore, but community lore, which in some ways is more powerful, more lasting, because it's not controlled by a company. It's owned by everyone who engages with it. Lost Silver has become its own kind of ghost story. Not just the story it tells, but the story of itself, how it appeared anonymously on 4chan, how it spread through the community, how it inspired countless adaptations and interpretations, how it's endured for over 14 years, how new generations continue to discover it. The story about being forgotten became impossible to forget. The narrative about dying became immortal through repetition. Gold failed to be remembered, but Lost Silver succeeded. There's a recursive quality to this. We remember Lost Silver, which is about gold not being remembered. By remembering the story, we're doing what the story says can't be done. We're preserving something, giving it permanence, proving that stories don't have to die, that meaning doesn't have to fade, that with enough people caring, with enough people sharing and creating and engaging, things can last. Not forever. Nothing lasts forever. But longer than one lifetime. Longer than one save file. Longer than one corrupted cartridge. This is the final message of Lost Silver that emerges when you step back and look at its impact. Inky. The story tells you nothing matters. That achievement is meaningless. That you'll be forgotten. But the story's existence proves the opposite. The anonymous author matters. Their creation meant something. It won't be forgotten. We're talking about it right now, years later, continents apart, time zones removed from its creation, but still here, still discussing, still analyzing, still feeling. Gold might have died alone and forgotten in the story, but Lost Silver won't die forgotten. It's part of internet culture now, part of gaming culture, part of Pokémon culture. It changed how people think about the franchise, influenced other creators, inspired countless works. That's legacy. That's meaning. That's what it looks like when something refuses to be forgotten. The practical advice the original narrator gives at the end is worth noting too. They say they eventually enjoyed Soul Silver immensely, but they can't unthink what the cursed cartridge showed them. They can't look at Unown the same way. This is the price of engaging with horror. It changes how you see things. It adds layers of meaning to what was once innocent. You can still enjoy Pokémon games after experiencing Lost Silver, but there's always going to be a small voice in the back of your mind, wondering, imagining, seeing the darkness beneath the bright colors and cheerful music. And maybe that's not entirely bad. Maybe seeing the darkness makes the light more precious. Maybe understanding that these experiences are temporary makes you appreciate them more. Sure. Maybe recognizing that your save file will eventually be deleted or corrupted motivates you to enjoy it while it exists. Tree. To take screenshots. To tell stories about your adventures, to share your experiences with others, to create art and writing and games inspired by your memories. to preserve what you can in whatever form you can. Lost Silver has inspired so much fan content precisely because it made people feel something. It disturbed them. It moved them. It made them think. And when art makes you feel and think, in a way you want to respond. You want to create something of your own. You want to engage with the themes. You want to add your voice to the conversation. This is how culture works, how stories spread and evolve and persist. One person creates, others respond. Their responses inspire more responses. The original work becomes a seed that grows into a garden of interpretations and reimaginings. The fan game is a response to the original story. Apris. The updated Lost Silver is a response to the fan game. The additional roots are responses to fan theories. The YouTube narrations are responses for people who prefer audio. The fan art is visual responses. The analysis videos are intellectual responses. The discussions on forums and subreddits are communal responses. Each person adding their perspective, their interpretation, their feelings, and together all these responses create something larger than any single work. A collective understanding, a shared mythology. This is what Lost Silver has become. Not just a creepypasta, not just a fan game, but a piece of shared culture. A reference point, a touchstone. When Pokémon fans want to discuss dark interpretations of the franchise, Lost Silver comes up. When horror fans want to discuss effective video game creepypastas, Lost Silver comes up. When game developers want to create something disturbing, they reference Lost Silver's techniques. When writers want to explore themes of mortality and legacy in gaming, they look to Lost Silver as a model. The story has transcended its origins. It doesn't matter that the original author was anonymous. It doesn't matter that we don't know who they were or what inspired them. The work speaks for itself. It stands on its own merits. And it continues to find new audiences, new players discovering the fan game, new readers finding the original text, new creators being inspired to make their own dark Pokémon stories. Each generation reinterprets Lost Silver through their own lens, finds new meanings in it, and derbuy new connections to their own lives and experiences. For some, Lost Silver is about depression, the gradual loss of self, the feeling of fading away while the world continues without noticing. For others, it's about legacy, the fear that your life's work will be erased. That nobody will remember you contributed anything. For others still. It's about childhood nostalgia being corrupted, about growing up and losing innocence. About realizing the things you loved were never as perfect as you remembered. All these interpretations are valid. The story is rich enough to support multiple readings, deep enough that different people find different meanings. That's the mark of genuinely good horror. Senan, not just scaring you, but making you think, making you feel, making you confront things you'd rather not confront, and doing it through a medium you care about, through characters and worlds you have emotional connections to. Pokémon is perfect for this because so many of us have deep nostalgia for it. We played these games as children. We need They were our introduction to gaming for many of us, our first experience with collecting and trading, our first online interactions in some cases, our first competitive gaming experiences. Pokémon has been part of our lives for decades, so when something like Lost Silver comes along and makes us question our relationship with the franchise, it hits harder than it would with a series we care less about. The story works because we love Pokémon, because we care about these games, because we have hundreds of hours invested in these worlds. If Lost Silver was about a franchise we didn't care about, it would just be a spooky story. Mildly interesting, quickly forgotten. But because it's about Pokémon, because it's weaponizing our nostalgia and affection, it becomes personal. It becomes something we can't easily dismiss. It lodges in our minds, changes how we see the games, makes us think twice before starting a new playthrough. And yet, we keep playing Pokémon. We keep starting new adventures. We keep catching them all, because the message of Lost Silver, while dark, isn't nihilistic enough to make us stop. It says achievements are temporary, but we achieve anyway. It says we'll be forgotten, but we create memories anyway. It says nothing lasts, but we love anyway. We play anyway. We enjoy anyway. Because what else can you do? The alternative is to do nothing. To not play, to not try, to not achieve anything because it won't last anyway. But that's not really living. That's just existing. Lost Silver might say that Goal's accomplishments were meaningless, but they meant something to him while he was alive. They gave him purpose. They gave him joy. The fact that they didn't last forever doesn't erase the fact that they mattered in the moment. Maybe that's the real lesson. Not that achievement is meaningless, but that meaning itself is temporary. And that's okay. Things don't have to last forever to matter. Experiences don't have to be permanent to be valuable. Your Pokémon adventure might eventually be deleted, but you had the adventure. You felt the excitement. You experienced the joy. And nobody can take that away. Even when the save file is gone, even when the cartridge stops working, you'll still have the memory. And memories, while they fade, are what we're really collecting anyway. Lost Silver reminds us that everything ends, but it doesn't tell us not to begin. It shows us death and loss and decay. But it doesn't say life isn't worth living. It makes us confront uncomfortable truths, but truths we need to confront. Because understanding that things are temporary makes them more precious. Knowing that nothing lasts forever makes the time we have more valuable. Recognizing that we'll all eventually be forgotten makes the connections we form now more meaningful. This is why Lost Silver endures. Not because it's the scariest story ever written. Not because it has the best jump scares or the most disturbing imagery, but because it's honest. Because it says things that need to be said. Because it makes us think about questions we'd rather avoid. Because it takes something we love and shows us its shadow. And in doing so, it makes us appreciate the light more. So, let's bring this full circle back to where we started. That weathered cartridge sitting in someone's drawer. That used copy of Pokémon Silver with a corrupted save file. That story posted anonymously on 4chan over 14 years ago. Ah, it should have disappeared. Should have been buried under millions of other posts. Should have been forgotten like so many other creepypastas. But it wasn't. We remembered. We preserved it. We shared it. We built upon it. We kept it alive. And in keeping Lost Silver alive, we did what gold couldn't do. We made something permanent. Or at least, as permanent as anything can be in a digital age. We proved that stories matter. That art matters. That the things we create and share can outlive us. Not literally. Not forever. But long enough. Long enough to touch people we'll never meet. Long enough to influence creators we'll never know about. Long enough to become part of the culture. Part of the conversation. Part of what makes this strange online world meaningful. If you've stuck with me through this entire deep dive, thank you. Thank you for listening to me talk about a creepypasta for over 2 hours. Thank you for engaging with these ideas. Thank you for being part of the community that keeps stories like this alive. Because that's what this is really about. Community. Shared experiences. Collective memory. We're all in this together. All trying to make sense of existence through the stories we tell. All trying to find meaning in a world that often seems meaningless. All trying to be remembered. To matter. To leave something behind. Lost Silver is one story in an infinite collection of human stories. But it's a good one. An important one. One that deserves to be analyzed and discussed and preserved. One that teaches us something about ourselves, about our relationship with games, about our fear of death, an obsession with legacy, about how nostalgia works and why horror fascinates us, about the spaces between joy and sorrow, about the darkness beneath the light. So the next time you boot up a Pokémon game, any Pokémon game, take a moment. Think about Lost Silver. Think about gold standing alone in that graveyard. Think about all the saved games that have been deleted. All the adventures that have been forgotten. All the players who moved on to other things. And then appreciate what you're about to do. Appreciate the adventure you're starting. Appreciate that you get to experience this. That you get to catch these Pokémon. Battle these trainers. Explore these routes. Build these memories. Even though it won't last forever. Even though someday your save will be deleted too. Even though eventually you'll move on. None. Right now. In this moment. It matters. It's real. It's yours. And maybe, just maybe, you'll create something from your experiences. Maybe you'll write your own story. Make your own fan game. Draw your own art. Record your own video. Maybe you'll add your voice to the conversation. Become part of the community. May you help preserve what matters. Maybe your creation will touch someone the way Lost Silver has touched so many. Maybe it'll last. Maybe it won't. But you'll have created it, and that's what counts. Because this story didn't just impact creepypasta culture and Pokémon fandom. It influenced how we think about video game horror as a medium, how we approach the idea of corrupted nostalgia, how we understand the relationship between players and the games they love. Video game horror existed long before Lost Silver, obviously. We had Silent Hill and Resident Evil. We had survival horror as an established genre, but those were games designed to be scary. Games where horror was the intended experience. You bought Silent Hill expecting to be frightened. That was the whole point. What Lost Silver represented was different. It was taking a non-horror game, a children's game, and revealing the horror within it. Not by adding blood and monsters, but by exploring implications the original game never intended. This approach has become increasingly common. Look at any dark theory video on YouTube, any disturbing implications thread on Reddit, any reinterpretation of childhood media through a horror lens. Lost Silver pioneered this technique, or at least it perfected it. It showed how you could take something innocent, something beloved, and make it terrifying not by changing it, but by asking questions about it. By taking it seriously in ways the creators never intended. By following the logic to uncomfortable conclusions. The Pokémon games have parents dying or absent. That's canon. But the games present it matter-of-factly. Your dad isn't around. You live with your mom. The rival has family issues. It's just background detail. Lost Silver asks, what happened to these parents? What happened to Gold's father? What happened to make a 10-year-old leave home on a dangerous journey catching wild animals? And in asking these questions, it reveals darkness the games never acknowledged. This technique has been applied to countless other franchises since. Dark theories about Mario, disturbing interpretations of Zelda, creepypastas about Animal Crossing and Minecraft and every other beloved game. Some are more successful than others. Many are derivative, but they all owe something to Lost Silver's template. The idea that you can create horror by deconstructing childhood favorites, by taking their logic seriously, by asking what if. The academic study of creepypasta is relatively new, but it's growing. Researchers in folklore and digital culture are examining these stories, treating them as modern folk tales, oral traditions adapted for the internet age. And Lost Silver frequently appears in these studies as an example of effective digital storytelling, as a case study in how internet communities create and preserve culture, as evidence that anonymous collaborative creation can produce work as meaningful as anything with a single credited author. There's something democratizing about this. The original poster didn't need permission to create Lost Silver, didn't need to pitch it to a publisher, didn't need credentials or connections. Just posted it on 4chan and let it find its audience. Reed Maxwell didn't need permission to make the fan game. Didn't need licensing agreements or legal approval. Yes. Just created it and shared it for free. Artists didn't need commissions or contracts to draw Lost Silver fan art. They just made it because the story moved them. This is creation outside traditional gatekeepers, outside the systems that usually control who gets to tell stories. It's messy and uncontrolled and sometimes problematic, but it's also pure in a way. People creating because they want to create, because they have something to say, because they were inspired by someone else's creation. No money changing hands, no corporate oversight, no focus groups or market testing. Just art responding to art, stories building on stories, culture creating itself organically. Lost Silver represents the best of this system. A story that emerged from nowhere, resonated with people, inspired countless adaptations and interpretations, and became part of our shared cultural language, all without any centralized control. Barushan, all through organic community engagement. It's beautiful in its own strange way. Proof that the internet, for all its problems, can facilitate genuine cultural creation. The way Lost Silver handles player agency is worth examining more closely. Sure way, because it's doing something sophisticated with the interactive medium. In most games, you have agency. Your choices matter. Your skill determines outcomes. You progress by getting better. By learning patterns. By mastering mechanics. The game respects your input, responds to your decisions, rewards your efforts. Lost Silver systematically removes this agency. You can't choose your trainer name. You can't select your team. You can't leave locations when you want. You can't win battles through skill. Now as the root, you can't change the outcome. Every choice has been made. Every action predetermined. You're watching more than playing. Pressing buttons to advance a story that's already been written. Already ended. Already failed. This is deeply unsettling for players trained to expect agency. We're used to games respecting our choices. When that respect is withdrawn, when the game makes clear your input doesn't matter, it creates a specific kind of horror. The horror of helplessness, of inevitability, of watching tragedy unfold without being able to prevent it. You know what's coming. You can see the ending approaching, but you can't stop it, can't change it, can only witness. This mirrors how we experience many things in life. We see problems coming, know things are going wrong, understand the trajectory, but we can't always change it. Sometimes we're just along for the ride. Sometimes we're passengers in our own lives. Lost Silver makes this feeling interactive, makes you experience it through gameplay, makes you feel the frustration of pressing buttons that don't matter, of making choices that aren't real choices, of pretending to have control when you have none. The false interactivity is almost worse than no interactivity. If Lost Silver was a purely linear story, you'd accept your lack of control. But it looks like a game, functions like a game in many ways. You move a character around, you open menus, you select options, but none of it matters. You're performing the motions of gameplay without the substance. It's like being asked to participate in a conversation where your responses are ignored, where you're speaking but nobody's listening, where you exist but don't matter. This extends to the meta level too. You, the actual player playing the Lost Silver fan game, have no control over the original story. You can't save Gold, can't change his fate, can't rewrite the ending. You're engaging with a fixed narrative, a story that's already been told. You can interpret it differently, can create your own works inspired by it, but the core story remains unchanged. Gold dies alone and forgotten. That's the ending. That's the truth of the narrative. And no amount of fan fiction or alternate interpretations changes it. Unless, and this is interesting, you consider that by remembering the story, by sharing it, by creating content around it, you are changing Gold's fate, not in the narrative. He still dies there, still ends up in that grave. But in our world, Gold isn't forgotten. We remember him. We talk about him. We analyze his story. We create art about him. In a way, we've saved him from the fate he feared most, not death, but being forgotten. So maybe we do have agency after all, not in the game, not in the story, but in how we respond to it, not in what we do with it, not in how we keep it alive. That's a different kind of power, a metatextual power. The power to give meaning to fiction, to make imaginary characters matter in the real world, to transform pixels and text into something that affects people's lives. The psychological impact of lost silver on people who engage with it deeply is real. However, not in a dangerous way. Nobody's being harmed by this story. But it does change how people think, how they see Pokémon games, how they conceptualize nostalgia, how they think about their own mortality and legacy. Art that makes you think differently afterward is powerful art, whether it's positive or negative. Whether you enjoyed the experience or found it disturbing, if it changed your perspective, it succeeded. Some people report being unable to play Pokémon games the same way after experiencing Lost Silver. They see graveyards in Lavender Town differently now. They think about Unown differently. They wonder about the implications of Pokémon fainting. They question the cheerful surface of the games. This isn't necessarily bad, it's just different. A loss of innocence, maybe, but also a gain of depth, an appreciation for layers that weren't visible before. Others find Lost Silver enhances their enjoyment of Pokémon because it adds richness, adds context, makes the games feel more substantial, knowing that people have thought this deeply about them, that there's a whole subculture of fans creating dark interpretations. It makes Pokémon feel less like just a children's game, more like a cultural phenomenon complex enough to support multiple readings. From the cheerful official version to the dark fan interpretations. Both are valid. Both exist simultaneously. This is the beauty of transformative works. They don't replace the original. They add to it, expand the universe, create new ways of engaging with material you already love. Lost Silver doesn't make Pokémon Silver worse. It makes it more interesting, more discussable, more worthy of analysis and interpretation. It treats the game like art deserving serious consideration, and in doing so, elevates both the game and the creepypasta. The timing of Lost Silver's creation is worth considering too. 2010 was an interesting moment in internet culture. Social media was maturing, but hadn't yet centralized in the way it is now. 4chan was at its cultural peak. Creepypasta was flourishing. YouTube was filled with independent creators. Forums and communities were thriving. It was this perfect moment for organic culture creation. Before algorithms controlled what we saw, before monetization dictated what got made, before everything became professionalized and sanitized, Lost Silver emerged from and helped define that moment. It's a product of its time in many ways. The anonymous posting, the community collaboration, the free sharing, the lack of commercial intent. Today, a story like Lost Silver might be immediately optioned, turned into a movie or TV show, career monetized and corporatized. But in 2010, it could just exist as a story, as art, as something people shared because they wanted to, not because they could profit from it. There's nostalgia for that era of internet culture now. People miss the Wild West days, the freedom, the creativity, the sense that anyone could create anything and find an audience if it resonated. Pokémon. Lost Silver represents that period. It's a time capsule, a reminder of what internet culture looked like before it became corporatized, before influencers and algorithms, when creation was motivated by passion rather than profit. Of course, we can't go back. The internet has changed, culture has changed, we've changed, but we can preserve what was good about that era. We can keep telling stories like Lost Silver. Keep creating for the sake of creation. Takiazon and Kane keep sharing art freely. Keep building communities around shared interests rather than commercial transactions. Lost Silver's continued relevance suggests people still value that kind of creation. Still want art that comes from genuine passion rather than calculated marketing. The comparison between Lost Silver and officially licensed Pokémon horror is interesting, because there really isn't any. The Pokémon company doesn't create horror content. They maintain strict control over the brand. Keep it cheerful and child-friendly. Avoid anything too dark or disturbing. This is understandable from a business perspective. Pokémon is a multi-billion-dollar franchise aimed at children. They're not going to risk that with official horror content. But this creates space for fan creators. Space for stories like Lost Silver that explore what official content won't. That ask questions the brand won't ask. That push boundaries the company won't push. In a way, fan works like Lost Silver serve a necessary function. They let the community explore darker interpretations. Let adults engage with Pokémon in more mature ways. Let the franchise grow beyond its intended demographic, all without threatening the brand's core identity. This is healthy for any long-lived franchise. Having both official cheerful content and fan-created dark content. Having multiple ways to engage with the material. Having space for different interpretations. It keeps the franchise dynamic. Keeps it interesting. Keeps it relevant across different age groups and interests. Kids can enjoy the bright, happy Pokémon. Adults can appreciate darker fan creations. Both groups are engaging with the same core material, just in different ways. The Pokémon company has generally been tolerant of fan works. They don't aggressively shut down projects. Don't sue creators, Maintain a relatively hands-off approach. This is wise, because fan works like Lost Silver ultimately benefit the brand. Keep people talking about Pokémon. Keep people engaged with the franchise. Create free marketing and free content that maintains interest between official releases. Imagine if Lost Silver had been shut down. If the Pokémon Company had issued cease and desist orders. If they'd forced the fan game offline. It would have created negative publicity, alienated the fan community, damaged goodwill. And for what? Lost Silver isn't competing with official products. It's not replacing legitimate Pokemon games. It's supplementing them. Adding to the cultural conversation around the franchise, making Pokemon more interesting and discussable. The fact that Lost Silver has existed for 14 years without legal issues shows mature brand management, understanding that fan passion is valuable, backdoor that fan creativity enhances rather than threatens official content, that allowing space for unofficial interpretations strengthens the brand long term. This is the model more franchises should follow. Embrace fan works. Celebrate creativity. Recognize that passionate fans are your best asset. Lost Silver also demonstrates the educational potential of Creepypasta. Students engage with these stories, analyze them, write about them. Teachers use them in literature classes to discuss digital storytelling, to examine horror as a genre, to explore how communities create and share culture. Lost Silver is sophisticated enough to support literary analysis, has enough depth to warrant serious academic attention. This legitimizes Creepypasta as a form. Shows it's not just cheap horror for teenagers. It can be genuinely well-crafted storytelling. It can explore meaningful themes. It can demonstrate literary techniques. It can teach us about narrative and character and symbolism. Lost Silver works as a teaching tool because it does all these things well. Because it repays close reading. Because there's substance beneath the horror. The fact that we can spend over 2 hours analyzing Lost Silver proves this. If it was just a simple scary story, be saying there wouldn't be this much to say. But it's rich enough to support extensive analysis, layered enough to reward deep engagement, meaningful enough to deserve preservation and discussion. That's the mark of quality storytelling regardless of medium or genre. So here we are, at the end of this extensive exploration. We've examined Lost Silver from every angle, analyzed its themes and techniques, discussed its impact and legacy, explored its meanings and implications. And through it all, the story remains powerful, disturbing, meaningful. That's what makes great horror endure. It resists easy answers. It keeps revealing new layers. Gold is still in that graveyard, still alone, still waiting, but perhaps not forgotten, not entirely, because we've spent this time with his story, walking through his digital world, understanding his fate, remembering. Maybe that's all any story can hope for. To be remembered, to touch someone, to mean something, even briefly, even temporarily. Gold's story ended tragically in Lost Silver. But the story itself continues, quietly, persistently, finding new listeners in the dark, and perhaps that's enough. Perhaps that's all we can ever hope for. To exist in memory, to persist in the stories people tell, to remain even as everything else fades. Gold might have feared being forgotten in his world, but here, in ours, he remains. Not forever. Nothing lasts forever. But for now, for tonight, for this moment we've shared together, he exists. The cartridge may be corrupted, the save file degraded, the Game Boy long since powered off, but the story persists, passed from person to person, whispered in forums, analyzed in videos, remembered in quiet moments. That's its own kind of immortality. Fragile, temporary, but real. And now, as we reach the end, as the analysis fades, as your eyes grow heavy, Gold returns to his grave. The Unown spell their messages in the darkness. The transparent sprites drift through empty towns. Everything is as it was, as it always will be, waiting in that corrupted cartridge, waiting for the next person to discover it, waiting to tell its story again, somewhere in the digital darkness. Gold stands alone. But maybe he's not truly alone anymore. Maybe we've kept him company for a little while, in our own way, by listening, by understanding, by remembering. And that has to be enough, because it's all we have. We will sign these moments, these stories, these quiet hours in the dark, exploring the shadows between nostalgia and horror, between memory and loss, between the games we loved and the truths we discovered. Rest well, the story is finished. Gold's fate is sealed. The grave remains, and somewhere, in a drawer, or a box, or a memory, that weathered cartridge waits, silent, patient, holding its secret, holding its ghost, holding its story, forever. Good night.